Chair Flores-Feng, we are ready to begin.
Welcome to the June 13th, 2025 regular meeting of the San Francisco Ethics Commission. Today's meeting is live cablecast on SF Gov TV and live streamed online at sfgovtv.org/ethicslive. For public comment, members of the public may attend in person or may participate by phone or on the WebEx platform as explained in our agenda document. Clerk, can you please explain how remote public comment will be handled?
Certainly. Public comment will be available on each item on this agenda. Each member of the public will be allowed 3 minutes to speak. For those attending in person, opportunities to speak during the public comment period will be made available here in room 400, City Hall. For those attending remotely, the public comment period can also be provided via phone call by calling 1-415-655-0001. Access code is 2664-895-0416, followed by the pound sign, and then press pound again to join as an attendee. When your item of interest comes up, press *3 to raise your hand to be added to the public comment line. Public comment is available via the WebEx client application. Use the WebEx link on the agenda to connect and press the raise hand button to be added to the public comment line. For detailed instructions on how to interact with the telephone system or WebEx client, please refer to the public comment section of the agenda document for this meeting. Public comment may be also submitted in writing and will be shared with the Commission after this meeting has concluded and will be included as part of the official meeting file. Written comments should be sent to ethics.commission@sfgov.org. Members of the public who attend Commission meetings, including remote attendants, are also expected to behave responsibly and respectfully. During the public comment period, please address your comments to the Commission as a whole and not to an individual member. People who engage in name-calling, shouting, interruption, foul language, or other distracting behavior may be excluded from participation.
Thank you, Clerk. I now call the meeting to order. Clerk, will you please call the roll under item 1?
Certainly. Chair Flores-Feng?
Aye.
Commissioner Salahi?
Aye.
Commissioner Tsai?
Aye.
Commissioner Francois?
Aye.
Chair Flores-Feng, with 4 members present, you have a quorum.
With that, I call agenda item 2. Is there anyone in the room who would like to offer public comment? Clerk, would you please check if there's any remote public comment on this item?
There is 1 person in the queue.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Caller, your time start now.
Great. Good morning. It's David Pilpel. I have several brief comments under item 2, general public comment. First, if you could please post PDF versions of all agendas, agenda items, and attachments, that would be great. It is confusing that some documents are still only line HTML documents, and it takes several extra steps to convert them to PDFs to print. Second, I found the interested persons meetings a few weeks ago to be very helpful and open. That's the subject of a later agenda item. I appreciate staff's work and will follow up on that. Next, I found the training material for the annual Ethics and Sunshine training earlier this year to be quite heavy on legal matters and very light on practical matters, and I've already communicated that to staff. Next, despite efforts to promote compliance, the last year saw 2 city department heads, the HRC and Status of Women Commission leave, and at least 2 nonprofits, perhaps more, SF Safe and the SF Parks Alliance, under investigation. To me, existing education, compliance, and training efforts are falling short, and we can do better. Next, for item 10, later on the agenda, only the staff report is available online. The links for the other attachments do not seem to work. And finally, I'll have more to say on other agenda items, and thank you very much for listening.
Thank you for your comments.
Anyone else?
And caller, there's nobody else in the queue.
Okay, thank you. Hearing no further members of the public wishing to speak, general public comment under item 2 is now closed. Okay. I now call the consent calendar. Colleagues, as noted on the agenda, there will be no separate discussion on a consent calendar item unless a request is made by a commission member or a member of the public in attendance, in which event the matter will be removed from the consent calendar and considered as a separate item. Does any commissioner wish to discuss any item on the consent calendar? Any member of the public wish to speak or discuss any item on the consent calendar? No one in the room. Is there anyone in the queue?
Chair Flores Fang, there's one person in the queue. Welcome, caller. Your time starts now.
Can you hear me again?
Yes.
Great. It's David Pilpel again. Just a request under item 4, the executive director's report. If Director Ford could perhaps give a couple of sentences about how the budget presentation went on Wednesday. I'd be interested, and perhaps the rest of the commission and the public would be interested. Thanks.
Chair Flores Fang, there's no more callers in the queue.
Thank you. Should we now move to separate that item from the calendar, or can we just proceed with discussion of that item that was just requested? Okay. At the end, or it's number 4?
You can do it just.
Okay, great. All right, thank you. Clerk, public comment on the consent calendar is now closed. We proceed with item number 4, the executive director's report. Any comment from the staff on that?
Sure. Would you like an update on the budget hearing?
That would be helpful. Thank you.
Sure. So the budget hearing is available. It was recorded, so it can be viewed through SF.gov TV. So if the commenter wants to watch it, he can watch it. I don't really have much to say other than what happened during the meeting. So we haven't had any discussions since then. And the committee had not much to say to us. Only one member of the committee spoke during our hearing, the chair of the committee. And she essentially was concerned about some of the positions that are filled being eliminated, as are we. So we're ready to work with her. We've reached out to try and schedule a time to meet. I know that committee had further hearings all day yesterday and today, so I can understand that there hasn't been time to meet with them yet, but we're hopeful to do that and obviously continue to advocate for our budget, which we have concerns about the next 2 fiscal years under the proposed budget.
Thank you. Any commissioners have any questions on that? Do we take public comment on that as well?
Chair Flores Fang, there's one person in the queue.
Okay.
Welcome, caller. Your time starts now.
That's all I needed. Thanks for the update. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very productive. We now close, I think, do we need a motion, or can I just close consent calendar?
You should have a motion because you'll be adopting the minutes.
Okay. All right. I would, does anybody move to adopt the consent calendar?
So moved.
Seconded.
I second.
Okay, clerk, can you please call the roll?
On the motion to adopt the consent calendar, Chair Flores Fang,
Aye.
Commissioner Salahi,
Aye.
Commissioner Say,
Aye.
Commissioner Francois,
Aye.
and Chair Flores Fang with 4 votes in the affirmative, the motion passes unanimously.
I now call agenda item 7, presentation, discussion, and possible action on Ethics Commission streamlining project regarding major developers, campaign consultants, recusal notifications, and trustee candidate reporting requirements. I'd like to request that our Policy and Legislative Affairs Manager, Michael Canning, please introduce the item.
Slides to appear. Excellent. Thank you, Commissioners. I'm Michael Canning, for the record, the Policy and Legislative Affairs Manager of the Commission. I'll be presenting this item with my colleague, Ryan Abusa, our Senior Policy Research Specialist. Today, we'll be presenting findings and preliminary recommendations regarding the streamlining of various programs and policies currently administered by the Ethics Commission. The purpose of this project is to evaluate programs and policies to determine if they are effective, efficient, and furthering the Commission's mission. San Francisco is often considered a leader nationally in ethics policy, which can lead the city to be quick to adopt new experimental approaches. An important part of this work is that it requires the city to later go back to validate those new approaches, looking back to ensure that they add value and are worth the cost to continue to administer. If not, they may need to be scaled back or otherwise reworked. This is particularly true when facing budget shortfalls. With limited staff resources, it may be prudent to focus on administering and enforcing more impactful rules. For example, it at times may be beneficial to walk back more experimental, low-functioning programs so that staff can better focus on core functions and higher impact areas. However, all of the preliminary recommendations offered today would be made regardless of budget shortfalls based on policy grounds, but the budget situation does kind of expedite the need for these recommendations. This project was launched earlier this year to review the Major Developers Program, the Campaign Consultant Program, the Supplemental Recusal Notification Requirement, the Trustee Election Filing System, and expenditure ceilings and reporting requirements related to the Public Financing Program. This fifth item will be discussed in item 8 later in the meeting. There were 2 interested persons meetings held in March in connection to this project. They included participation from various city departments and organizations, including the San Francisco Employees Retirement System, the Board of Supervisors, the League of Women Voters, different political consulting firms, individual campaign treasurers, as well as political and election law firm representatives. The goals of this presentation are to summarize the corresponding memo and review the preliminary recommendations for potential future action by the Commission, with the exception of one item that the Commission may act on today if it desires. First, we'll be talking about the Major Developers Program. This program was created by the Board of Supervisors in June of 2014, while the board was also making changes to the city's lobbyist program and creating the city's permit consultant program. The intent of the program largely appears to provide increased transparency into land use decision-making processes. The program requires real estate developers to register and disclose certain donations made to nonprofit organizations that have contacted city officers regarding major projects of the developer. This applies to projects certified environmental impact reports, or EIRs, under CEQA with estimated construction costs exceeding $1 million. The registration and reporting requirements of the program include that developers are required to register within 30 days of the certification of their EIR. Developers are required to provide information on themselves and their affiliates, as well as information on any nonprofit organizations to whom they have donated $5,000 or more within the last year before their EIR application was filed, and if those nonprofit organizations have made one or more contacts to a city officer regarding the developer's major project. The developers also are required to pay a $500 registration fee and file 4 quarterly reports that must be filed regardless of if donations occurred during those periods. And there's also a mechanism for late filing penalties. A potential timeline for the way this project works is that within the 90-day reporting period, a developer makes a donation to a nonprofit, and then that nonprofit decides to communicate about the developer's project with a city officer. The officer is then involved in meetings and decisions involving that project, potentially during that time period unaware that the donations were made. After 90 days, the reporting period ends, at which point donations still have not been disclosed. And then at day 105, the filings would be due for that 90-day reporting period, at which point the disclosures would be made to the Ethics Commission. We found that the program is generally fairly poorly structured. The reports made file retroactively, so city officers would not know about donations until after they've met with the nonprofit and potentially already made decisions. The reporting obligation also ends after 4 reports are filed, even if the project remains ongoing. The program also has an administrative burden and is poorly used. The $1 million threshold is likely low given the cost of development in the city. Additionally, 47% of all reports filed disclose no donations, meaning that no new public information is being provided for half of the filings made. No new information is going to the public for those. There's also a lack of awareness of the program in general. Staff have been unable to find any similar programs in other jurisdictions, which means that developers and members of the public are not likely to know that such a program exists in San Francisco or that it could be a source of data. This was confirmed during the interested persons meetings and other meetings with stakeholders where staff were largely unable to find anyone even aware of the program's existence or its objectives. Furthermore, the objectives of the program are largely unclear. Even if the program were to be improved or there would be more awareness made of the program, the overarching goals are unclear and largely redundant. The policy problem being addressed by the program is unclear. If a developer donates to a nonprofit and then that nonprofit independently decides to communicate about a development project, that is likely protected speech and not necessarily evidence of any corrupting influence. In fact, the city and other jurisdictions have programs that can require or incentivize developers to make similar donations for community benefit when establishing new development projects. Making a donation to potentially curry favor with a nonprofit that may communicate about a project is different from donating to a city official or their pet projects. The city has distinct rules against bribery and behested payments to address such attempts to influence city officials. Donations to nonprofits that subsequently decide to make comments about projects do not represent the same threat to the public's trust. Additionally, if a nonprofit is not making the decision to speak on its own behalf and the developer is instead paying the nonprofit to communicate for them, the city's lobbyist rules would already apply to that situation. In such a situation, the nonprofit would already be required to register and report those contacts as a lobbyist. Failing to register and report as a lobbyist when engaging in lobbying activity is already prohibited under the lobbyist chapter of the Campaign and Governmental Conduct Code, which is how we think issues of shadow lobbying should best be addressed. The preliminary recommendation regarding this program is to eliminate the registration and reporting components of the Major Developers Program and instead shift the program so that it better supports the city's existing lobbying rules and ensures that nonprofits being paid to engage in lobbying activity for a developer have the information they would need to accurately disclose such activity as required under current law.
Thank you, Michael. So next up, we will be talking a little bit about the Campaign Consultant Program. So for some quick background, the Campaign Consultant Program was implemented following the passage of Proposition G in 1997 with the intent to highlight political relationships and financial transactions that were not otherwise easily accessible to the public at that time. Campaign consultants, as currently defined in San Francisco's Campaign and Governmental Conduct Code, is any person or entity that receives or is promised to receive $1,000 or more in a calendar year for providing either campaign management or campaign strategy services. As part of the program, they are required to register and file a series of disclosures with our office. Since the program's implementation, it has largely gone unchanged, although as of December 2024, we have since migrated to a fully electronic filing system for campaign consultant registration, termination, and disclosures. While reviewing the program, we did find that the vast majority of information that is collected and disclosed by campaign consultants on their disclosures is readily and easily available across other sources, both through the Form 460 campaign statements that are filed by committees, as well as separate data sets across the Data SF repository. So very quickly reviewing the table, the consultant's identification and contact information, the description of their activity, the payments that are promised or received, contributions made, any vendor or sub-vendor information, depending on the activity that the consultant is kind of undertaking on behalf of their clients, gifts, city contracts, and appointments to public office is all information that is accessible elsewhere. The only information that you could not find outside of that would be the names of any local office holders or employees that are employed by the campaign consultant or any of their clients at the behest of the campaign consultant. So with regard to our findings from a review of the program, we did note a particularly high administrative burden as part of feedback received during our interested persons meetings, as well as some separate contact that we received from political treasurers and members of the public. It was noted very consistently that the kind of current requirements and definitions are fairly confusing, with particular regard for kind of first-time campaign consultants, smaller firms handling these types of filings. With regard to city resources, again, as previously mentioned, this is duplicating data disclosures that already exist in other places. It also takes additional staff time having to deal with advice and guidance questions, publishing and updating compliance materials, propping up our new electronic filing system, managing potential violations through enforcement, so on and so forth. Additionally, as kind of previously mentioned, our current definitions of campaign consultant, campaign management, and campaign strategy are fairly nebulous. They lean heavily on including but not limited to language, and we have found that there's a lot of confusion, and we tend to get a lot of questions from folks trying to figure out, am I a consultant? What do these disclosures require? How do I understand the difference between payments promised and payments received? And it kind of snowballs a little bit with those definitions. Additionally, the $1,000 qualification threshold is fairly low and casts a pretty wide net that could potentially include campaign staff whose duties otherwise do not kind of cover the scope of the intent of this program's disclosure requirements. Lastly, additional feedback that we received through our interested persons meetings indicated limited public value of this program. In particular, the campaign consultant disclosures realistically are not top of mind for a lot of members of the public when looking for kind of the relevant campaign finance information, coupled with the fact that it is significantly easier to find campaign disclosures and a lot of that information online now. We basically got a lot of feedback that specified that it's just not top of mind for folks. A lot of people mentioned that first and foremost, they'll just look at the ad that is right in front of them, and the disclaimer will tell them, oh, this was paid for by candidate committee A, or this was paid for by an independent expenditure committee that gets their top funding from A, B, and C. And they don't think to go to look at campaign consultant disclosures because they will go from the ad reasonably to our website and find the additional information that they are looking for. We did also, as part of our research, see if there are comparable jurisdictions that have campaign consultant programs. And the only thing that we did find through our research is that the city of Stockton considered implementing a campaign consultant program last year during 2024, but found that given the redundancies and amount of work that would go into kind of facilitating such a program, it was not worth it, and they ultimately decided against implementing a program. So with all of that in mind, our preliminary recommendation for the campaign consultant program is to eliminate the registration and reporting provisions, but maintaining the necessary definitions and supporting language, including the existing prohibition on campaign consultants lobbying their current or former clients. A lot of this kind of given that the purpose and intent of the campaign consultant program is to impose reasonable registration and disclosure requirements to assist the public in making informed decisions and protect their confidence in electoral and governmental processes, which is something that we do not feel is backed up by the program in its current iteration. With that, we do believe that the program focus should be shifted to ensure that campaigns have the necessary information to fully disclose their campaign consultant expenditures through the existing disclosure requirements that exist for campaign committees.
Thank you, Ryan. Next, we'll talk about the supplemental recusal notification requirement. Under state and city law, members of city boards and commissions who have a financial conflict of interest in a matter are required to recuse themselves from discussing or voting on that matter. Additionally, the city has a duty to file a supplemental recusal notification with the Ethics Commission. That additional requirement does not apply to members of the Board of Supervisors. In practice, the recusal process is that the recusal must be announced at the meeting, and a description must be given as to what gives rise to the conflict of interest. The person must recuse from acting on or even discussing the matter. They must leave the room while the matter is being discussed, acted on, or otherwise before the body. This recusal then gets recorded in the official meeting minutes for the meeting. And then within 15 days, the member is required to sign and file a disclosure document with the Ethics Commission documenting the recusal. The findings for this program are that it's largely redundant. The information is already being disclosed during the meeting and reflected during the meeting minutes. This is also another situation where this disclosure is unique to San Francisco, so most people do not expect there to be an existing kind of freestanding data set where they would go to get this information. This was also reflected during the interested persons meetings, where we asked attendees where they would expect to find information about a recusal made, and the general impression was they would go to the meeting minutes where the recusal was made and look there and would not think to check a separate recusal notifications data set. There's also an administrative burden associated with this recusal notification. It takes work by commission secretaries who are often responsible for helping make sure members are aware of the need to file this document and helping them file it. It's also a burden on the volunteer commissioners themselves who have the obligation to file it. And then if they don't file it, they could be faced with an enforcement action or potential penalties for a failure to file this recusal notification, even if they otherwise fully recused as required under state and local law. The recommendation for this project is to eliminate the supplemental recusal notification while keeping the rest of the recusal process unchanged.
Thank you, Michael. And so last up for this agenda item, we will be talking a bit about the trustee election disclosure program. So within the city and county of San Francisco, there are 3 benefit-related boards that manage retirement and health benefits for city employees and retirees. They are the Health Service Board, the Retirement Board, and the Retiree Health Care Trust Fund Board. These boards are led in part by trustees who are elected by current and former city employees. When it comes to the administration of these elections, they are administered by the San Francisco Department of Elections, but I will again kind of reiterate that they are elected by current and former city employees, so the general public otherwise is not voting in these elections. So this program was created back in 2018 when sections of San Francisco's administrative code were amended to regulate trustee elections after third-party spending concerns from a particularly contentious 2017 election for the Retiree Health Care Trust Fund Board. So with regard to the filing requirements, when the legislation was kind of copy-pasted over into the admin code, the idea was to require all candidates in trustee elections to follow the same registration and disclosure procedures that candidates for city elective office would follow. And so, as far as the filings that they must complete with our office, they must file their candidate Form 700, they file the candidate intention statement, Form 501, an initial statement of organization, Form 410, including bank account information. I will harp on this a little bit later, but I really want to drive home that they are required to open bank accounts and disclose that information when they file with our office. As well as following the standard disclosure cadence of any pre-election, semi-annual statements, late contribution reports, so on and so forth. Trustees that are successful in their election are required to continue filing statements on a semi-annual basis until the end of their terms, while unsuccessful candidates may terminate their committees and cease their filing obligations after the election. In the event that there are third-party spenders, they are required to register with our office by filing a statement of organization and submit all applicable and required campaign finance statements. So for our findings, this was a fun one. We looked back all the races since 2018 and found that only 7 candidates have ever registered and filed since this requirement went into effect. Of those 7, only 1 candidate has ever disclosed raising funds, and they raised a total of $78.60, which is below the $100 itemization threshold, so it didn't even show up as a line item on their campaign disclosure statement. It is just a lump sum of, aggregated unitemized totals down at the bottom of their statement. We did also note that the barriers to entry are pretty severe for candidates that want to get involved, considering that they are often career public servants. They are employees or retirees of the city and county of San Francisco. They're not generally career politicians or folks with outside ambitions, but they're subject to a filing system that is more cumbersome than what is required for our public elected officials. So in particular, the fact that they are required to open a bank account, given that virtually none of them raise or spend funds, we have encountered issues in the past where candidates come to us and they say, hey, I'm required to open a bank account, but if I have below a certain balance, I have to pay a monthly fee, or they otherwise have to pay fees associated with opening an account, but they're not planning to spend any money, and it creates a barrier for them. It's kind of a logjam for us because these rules are outlined in the administrative code and not the campaign and governmental conduct code, coupled with the fact that successful trustee candidates have to continue filing while they hold their position, whereas publicly elected officials are free to terminate their committees upon election unless they would like to continue with an office holder committee. Lastly, there is a noted administrative burden. So during the interested persons meetings, we did have a chance to speak with some of the staff from these boards. And in particular, in my previous role with the Ethics Commission, having worked on these elections, there is a lot that's going on. The board staff are truly doing some phenomenal work because they are often the go-between between our office and the candidates. They're fielding questions, helping direct them. There's a lot of back and forth as we get through the nomination period, and it's a lot for them, and it's kind of us having to manage an additional group with regard to the election disclosure program. Part of that does include managing the overlapping nomination and reporting periods. Given the kind of protracted nature of the trustee elections, while our office is able to anticipate the end of terms, we don't always know that elections are going to happen, just because until that nomination period closes, there could be 2 seats and 2 candidates, and then there's no election. There could be 2 seats and 1 candidate. I don't really know what happens then, but it kind of puts us in a position where we do a lot of prep work without even knowing if there's actually going to be an election, and that similarly involves looping in the board staff, putting the calendars together. We have to consolidate reporting periods because the first pre-election that they file over the last 3 elections has always overlapped with the nomination period, and it just creates a lot of administrative burden that is not the best use of city resources between the board staff and our office. Last thing that I will mention on this is that, again, these rules are codified in the administrative code and not the campaign and governmental conduct code, which limits the ability of our office to effectively implement these rules. So as part of our preliminary recommendation, we do note that we recommend eliminating the filing requirement in its entirety because it provides minimal public benefit. Again, the general public does not vote in these elections and imposes disproportionate and unnecessary burdens on candidates and city staff. At this point, I will also note that the sections of the administrative code that pertain to trustee elections are going to need to be amended anyway. Under the recently passed Assembly Bill 1637, we are migrating to a .gov web domain. And as part of that, that means the disclaimer requirements outlined in the administrative code for trustee elections is going to be out of date. So while we're in there potentially making amendments, it would be nice to just remove this requirement entirely. As part of that, as Michael did mention earlier, there is an item agendized for action that would include Chair Flores-Fang and Executive Director Ford sending a direct communication to the Board of Supervisors to initiate this legislation. I will mention that you do not have to. You may. This is not a requirement. This is just part of our recommendation.
Thank you, Ryan. As previously mentioned, scaling down low-performing programs is an important part of maintaining strong, effective ethics rules in the city. We believe that by amending these poor-performing projects and policies, staff will be better able to focus on priority work in other areas, such as proactive enforcement, improved educational resources, and strengthening the core rules administered by the Commission regarding lobbyists, city officials, and campaign finance. Potential next steps on this project include discussion and feedback today from the Commission. We'd very much like to hear any questions, comments, or concerns commissioners have. We are already working with the City Attorney's Office to draft legislation regarding major developers, campaign consultants, and the supplemental recusal notifications. Additionally, we'd be working with members of the board, as Board of Supervisor approval would be required to enact any of these legislative changes. And then draft legislation would be brought back before the Commission for additional discussion and potential voting on that legislation, which would be the trigger for introducing it at the Board of Supervisors. It would be voted on by the Commission and then referred to the board for action on their end. And yeah, lastly, as Ryan just mentioned, the trustee election disclosure program does not require an ethics commission vote as it's part of the admin code. But we would recommend the commission communicate formally to the Board of Supervisors a desire to change that program by sending a letter to the board to request that. Thank you, and we're happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. That was very helpful. I have a few questions. I don't want to hog the mic. If my commissioners have any questions, if my fellow commissioners have any questions, happy to let you get started.
I have questions, but I'll go after you. It's
okay.
Fine.
I think we can go program by program, but just as a general matter, I understand that one of our metrics for low performance is that people aren't really using it or people are confused by it, and I think one of my concerns with that being a metric is that maybe the next step is to clarify rather than completely excise certain programs. However, it sounds like this has come up in interested persons meetings, and it sounds like people say even if you kind of fix this, it's not working. And so I'm interested to hear very specific feedback from the interested persons meetings about which of these are just not working, even if just structurally.
Yeah, I think a good example of that is the campaign consultant program. Again, because these are kind of unique programs that San Francisco has that other jurisdictions don't have. There's kind of the expectation that no one would expect to go to that data set because they wouldn't expect it to exist. For example, I personally worked on a lot of campaigns over the years, and if I was to be hired by a campaign in San Francisco, I would not even think that I would have to register as a campaign consultant because that's not really a thing that exists other places. And I think as a result, that also impacts the public when, as Ryan mentioned, if they want to know more information about a campaign spending, they will see the disclaimer on the advertisement, or they'll go directly to our website to look for that information and find it with the rest of the campaign's expenditures, that they're paying this consultant, they're paying this printer, and they're paying this food vendor, and all that will be contained within the other expenditure filings. So even then, there's still kind of this added thing of it's unclear at what point someone would think, oh, I want to look up a specific campaign consultant and go to this data set. So I think part of that metric is just thinking about the utility and what the average user or consumer of the data would be looking for. And for that one, it doesn't seem like there would be a lot of people that would even think to go to that data set.
Ditto.
Great.
I have a follow-up on that. That is helpful, and I thank you for the whole presentation. I like the overarching project and idea motivating it. I think I share the chair's comment that I also don't find particularly persuasive the fact that people don't know about it or don't comply. But I do think the redundancies are something that introduce waste and inefficiency that we can try to avoid and eliminate here for a variety of reasons. But one of my questions on the campaign consultant program was, thank you for the very helpful chart on what is already available elsewhere. Do you have a sense of how many different sources somebody has to go to consolidate that information? And then the follow-up question is there a way for our dashboard to make it so that you can, if we don't already do this, search across all of them by campaign consultant to pull that data from the existing data sources rather than require the creation of an entirely duplicative data set?
Yeah. So that one, I'm going to very quickly go back to the table. One moment, please. So the vast majority of this information you'll be able to find it on a Form 460 campaign statement disclosure. So it would include the campaign consultant's identifying information. So it would be the name of the individual or the firm, and it would have an address. A phone number or an email address are not something that gets published for kind of individual vendors on a 460, and the publicly available version would have their address redacted, but the public is able to request unredacted versions as public records. A description of the consulting activity would exist in one of two forms on the Form 460. It would either be coded on their there's a schedule for particular expenditures, or it would either be coded as consulting, or they have the option to type in a short description if it's something a little bit more specific, if they have a mail vendor or something like that. The payments promised or received would also be on the Form 460. The political contributions made by a campaign consultant would potentially be across multiple 460s. So if there were a person of note, you would be able to find the consultants on one 460 and then go search their name in our data sets and kind of find their contributions for particular time periods. Vendor and sub-vendor information would also be on the Form 460. Gifts made by the campaign consultant, it does kind of depend. We do, I believe it's 3.2 and 6, have a prohibition on campaign consultants giving gifts in certain cases, but otherwise there are existing gift disclosure forms where those might show up. City contracts would potentially show up in the Form 126 database for contracts that are approved by the mayor or the Board of Supervisors. Appointments to public office, it kind of depends on where they're appointed. We do have notice of appointment forms that kind of come through our office. Otherwise, it's potentially reported on, you'll see somebody worked on a campaign and they were out there door knocking and then they got hired on to a supervisor's office. And then, so a couple of different ways that might show up. So that is all of the information that we collect and different places that it might show up. So potentially 2 to 3 different sources, depending on how deep you need to go.
And then I had a clarifying question about the trustee issue. It sounds like the recommendation is right, but when you said there are 7 filings that have been made under this, was that because there have only been 7 candidates, or only 7 have complied with the requirement?
Yes, so there were multiple. There were 7 candidates total, but they each had multiple filings. So basically through the kind of creation of their, they declared their candidacy, but as part of the program, just outright, if you are a candidate, you are required to register and file the relevant disclosures. So of those 7 candidates, I'm not sure off the top of my head how many total disclosures they filed, but out of all of them, only one ever raised money.
So that low number there is not a problem with compliance. It's just a low activity area that is calling for a lot of administrative work. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, that's helpful. That's helpful. And just going back to the campaign consultant, I had one follow-up on there so we could group our questions. You mentioned confusion around the language of who's a campaign consultant or what behavior is associated with somebody who would be a campaign consultant. Am I correct? I mean, this revision doesn't ameliorate or doesn't really mitigate that issue. Do we still provide resources for people who are unsure on these things, and what are those resources?
Yes. So we do have an existing campaign consultant's manual. I know that ahead of the 2026 election, I believe the Engagement and Compliance Division is working on getting those materials kind of updated. The policy team will be working in tandem with that. So our goal kind of under the new program and its shifted focus per our recommendations is to have those materials updated. So it's very much, in an easy to read and understandable format to where folks know that even if they do have additional questions, they can always come to our office. We fielded a fair number of campaign consultant advice and guidance questions during the last cycle. So it is something that we are well equipped and prepared to do, depending on if they just want to read the manual or if they want to reach out to us directly.
Yeah, and the main requirements for campaign consultants currently involve the registration and reporting, which is what we're recommending getting rid of. The other main rule is that campaign consultants are prohibited from lobbying their former clients. When they were a campaign consultant, they couldn't work on the campaign and then go become a lobbyist 6 months later and lobby their former campaign boss. That rule would be maintained, but that's also in the lobbying chapter already. So if they were engaging in lobbying activity, there'd be another touch point there to make sure they were aware of that rule. And then the main rule where there's potentially maybe unintentional violations would be failing to register and report, and getting rid of those would decrease the opportunity for those types of violations.
Great, that's helpful. Thank you. You can continue with your other question.
Oh, I had a kind of across-the-board question, because I think we've got a really good summary of the reasons to remove these programs. Has anybody been asking us to keep any version of these programs through your discussions or interested persons meetings? No? Okay.
Not really.
Yeah, not really. Like I mentioned with the Major Developers Program, unless you administer that program in our office or the planning department, in general, we found no one knows this program exists. And yeah, similarly, campaign staffers find the campaign consultant requirement kind of an additional hurdle for the folks they're hiring to work on campaigns. They have to go in and tell them how to file this new form instead of just disclosing that information on their other required forms. But yeah, we've not heard a lot of support for any of these programs. And we've also talked with the trustee bodies that run the trustee elections and did not get any flags from them around not having those requirements. They also, again, kind of see them as a burden on them, that they have people that I think they're often trying to encourage more people to run for those seats. And when they get someone in there and then say, okay, now you've got to register and create a bank account and start filing these forms indefinitely, they see that as a potential barrier to what they want, which is more people on those bodies.
Question that I think touches on the theme of today. So I see that part of the rationale for recommending that it be sunsetted or removed is that it's redundant. Do we have? I guess I just wonder how that comes about, right? Like what was the purpose of the program initially, and how did we not realize that it was redundant, and how can we avoid doing that in the future?
Yeah, I think that one, when it was created by the board in 2014, it was part of a larger package. They were making a bunch of substantial changes to the lobbyist chapter, as well as creating the permit consultant chapter. And this was, kind of thrown in there. When you look back to the histories and the coverage of that legislation, it was not really talked about. Maybe just a sentence of major developers will do a thing. So there's not a really great record of exactly what the situation was they were trying to ameliorate, but I think it's, when you're doing a big package of legislation, I think it's easy for things to get thrown in there, but don't really have a clear sense of exactly what they were hoping that would accomplish.
I have other questions, but anyone else on anything else?
I have a brief question regarding the campaign consulting program. Going back to your chart, is there anything that we need to do in terms of having a separate form just for that last item where it's missing?
So that is something that we could potentially explore. I, as part of this project, did go back and review campaign consultant filings. The difficulty that we encountered is that up until the end of 2024, they only exist in PDF format. There's not a clean searchable data set. But of the forms that I was able to review, I could not find one that disclosed this information. So once we are able to kind of complete that review, it is something that we can certainly consider.
Yeah, and as a reminder, this is the names of persons employed by their former client, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I think another point with that is that, creating a separate disclosure for that information might not be worth the cost associated with creating that. I think that's, could be an interesting data point that I would, hope journalists would kind of be, more attuned to identifying and finding out that this person worked on the campaign, and then at their behest, their brother got hired by the person they helped elect. That could be an interesting story. It's unclear if it would make sense to, dedicate a program just to surfacing that information, given how frequent that comes up and, what the, relative benefit is there. I know especially, with the budget situation we're currently facing, adding new programs or even maintaining ones that are not adding a lot of value can be challenging. I don't know if Director Ford wants to speak to the budget implications or any of that for creating new programs like that.
I mean, it's definitely something that we're really not doing right now, at least until we know what the budget's going to be, and I don't think that it's going to change much from what's been proposed. So I think any efficiency savings we can find so we can direct resources into where we really want to spend our time, our core programs, campaign finance, ethics, lobbying, doing that core compliance work, enforcement work, try and really shave off all the extras that just create a lot of drag on the organization. It'll really help. So, yeah.
It's a common occurrence of people, campaign consultants having their employees hired by public.
Not that I'm aware of in recent news coverage or enforcement actions. I think part of this program was kind of created out of a time when there was a impression in the city that campaign consultants were kind of pulling all the strings and running the board, and had a lot of outsized power. I don't think the kind of recent scandals and troubles the city's faced have really involved campaign consultants much at all. So I don't know if that was the reality then and has changed, or if that was just kind of a false impression that this was a universe of people that were wielding a lot of power and potentially detrimental influence in the city.
So I understand that as a threshold matter, the program is outlined in the administrative code, which kind of limits the scope of our power there to revise any portions of the program that might be problematic. So I know that this is one where you'd like some action today, or where the recommendation is that I sign a letter with Director Ford. I think that seems, given what you've explained in the context, that seems acceptable. I wonder whether that's a common practice or whether that's going to be. I wonder if it's a common practice, because I think that we've stated our position publicly, and so I wonder if that extra step is necessary or if it'll really move the needle.
Yeah, from talking to colleagues at the staffers of the Board of Supervisors, they thought that would be a helpful step, just to have kind of a letter on the public record articulating the rationale discussed during this meeting, and that would kind of give them the kind of clear indicator to move ahead with that. We have had some preliminary conversations with members of the board and seem interested in that reform. But I think since, unlike the other potential recommendations that are in the Campaign and Governmental Conduct Code, where the commission can be the first actor, it would be a helpful way to reflect this conversation and give the board kind of a clear reason to go ahead with pursuing such legislation.
I think before we move, we should take public comment on this. Thank you.
Chair Florsving, there is one in the queue.
Great. Can you hear me again?
Yes. Caller, your time starts now.
Great. David Pilpel, I'll try to be brief. 4 points. One, could you please post the presentation PDF for this item on the meeting website? I am generally in support of the staff recommendations and will try to follow up on other comments with Michael Canning. The 2, on supplemental recusal notifications, I would also standardize the disclosure and recusal requirements. I think personal or professional relationships now differ in requirements from financial conflicts of interest, and it might be helpful to clarify and standardize that. Next, I also understand a pretty significant ordinance was recently introduced at the Board of Supervisors, perhaps this week, to reduce the number of public reports to the board from various departments. While that effort is to this, taken together, the appearance is that the city will have less public reporting in general, despite continuing non-compliance with various existing laws, and hopefully continuing public concern about corruption, the appearance thereof, commission streamlining, and public accountability. And last, as staff develops language to implement this project, retaining the core disclosure elements that you talked about and leading filers and the public to where you can find that information would be helpful. And lastly, I would have staff prepare a final report on programs that are being sunsetted for other jurisdictions, commission staff, future supervisors and their staff, and the public at large, with an expanded program detail, history, and summary from what's in this report. But in general, good work by the staff, and thanks for listening.
Chair Flores Feng, there are no more callers.
Do I hear a motion on this matter for the chair to be authorized to sign a letter with the executive director requesting that the Board of Supervisors pursue discontinuing the trustee election reporting requirements?
I'll move.
A second.
Thank you. Clerk, on the motion to adopt the staff's recommendation for streamlining the proposals, or specifically for me to sign a letter with the executive director disclosing everything we've discussed today. Can you please call the roll?
Certainly. Chair Flores Feng,
Aye.
Commissioner Salahi,
Aye.
Commissioner Sai,
Aye.
Commissioner Francois. Chair Flores Feng, with 4 votes in the affirmative, the motion passes unanimously.
Now closed. I now call agenda item 8, presentation and discussion on streamlining of expenditure ceilings and reporting requirements for the public financing program and other changes to campaign finance rules. Welcome back.
Yes. Yes, a long time. Thank you. Again, for the record, Michael Canning, Policy and Legislative Affairs Manager. I'll again be presenting with Ryan Abusa, Senior Policy Research Specialist. This item is connected to the larger streamlining project discussed in the previous item and also seeks to address issues presented to the Commission in March as part of the Audit Division's Public Financing Program Post-Election Report. This presentation will summarize the corresponding memo and provide background information on the city's public financing program, the individual expenditure ceiling, threshold statements, and the voluntary expenditure ceiling. We'll then present findings and preliminary recommendations, as well as look at some additional findings and recommendations, and discuss next steps. The city's public financing program was established by Proposition O in 2000 to reduce the influence of money in politics and ensure that candidates with a demonstrated level of community support can secure sufficient resources to mount a viable campaign. Participating candidates for the Board of Supervisors can receive up to $255,000, and mayoral candidates can receive up to $1.2 million. This is the maximum amount of public funds that eligible participating candidates can receive. Candidates may raise and spend other non-public funds even if they're participating in the program. To participate in the program, candidates must agree to abide by an expenditure ceiling. These expenditure ceilings are limits on how much a participating candidate may spend overall from both their public and their non-publicly raised funds. Candidates are also required to file ongoing supplemental threshold reports throughout the election season. I'd also like to note at the onset that this project is focused on the expenditure ceilings and threshold reports and does not include any recommendations that change the eligibility requirements for the program or how much public funding a candidate may receive. The individual expenditure ceiling, as mentioned, participating candidates must adhere to an individual expenditure ceiling, or IEC. This is currently $350,000 for candidates for the Board of Supervisors and $1.7 million for mayoral candidates. This has been unchanged since 2019. Once a candidate in the race is certified to receive public funds, all participating candidates must adhere to their personal IEC going forward. The IEC may be adjusted currently to allow candidates to spend more in response to third-party spending or spending by their opponents. To determine if an adjustment needs to be made, staff look at the total supportive funds, TSF, and the total opposition spending, TOS. A candidate's IEC is raised when that candidate's TOS plus the highest TSF of an opponent exceed the candidate's current IEC. These adjustments are made in increments of $50,000 for Board of Supervisor candidates and $250,000 for mayoral races. When determinations are made, a public notice is provided from the Commission. This process can be mapped out as so. Candidates file their initial threshold statements. This is required as it is necessary for determining the potential eligibility of other candidates in the race. Then supplemental threshold statements are being filed, and committees making independent expenditures also file their statements required under state and local law. These filed statements are then reviewed by Ethics Commission auditors to determine if an adjustment is needed to any individual candidate's IEC. Those adjustments are then made and publicly communicated. Additional filings from the candidate campaigns and independent expenditure committees are made. Those are then reviewed, more adjustments may follow, and then this process continues indefinitely throughout the course of the election. In addition to the expenditure ceiling for publicly financed candidates, there is a companion program for other candidates known as the Voluntary Expenditure Ceiling, or VEC. This program allows other candidates to opt in to a ceiling should they wish to. It's available to candidates for the assessor recorder, city attorney, district attorney, public defender, sheriff, treasurer, as well as candidates for the Board of Education and the College Board. The VEC for citywide executive officers is $243,000 and $104,000 for candidates for the Board of Education or College Board. Those have been unchanged since 2009. Again, candidates opt into this by their nomination filing deadline, and once they have filed, they cannot withdraw. The voluntary expenditure ceiling is lifted for all candidates in the race if a non-participating candidate exceeds the current VEC, if independent expenditures or communications exceed the VEC, if a participating candidate exceeds the VEC. There are no ongoing threshold statements. Instead, notice is required to be given to the Ethics Commission when a limit is going to be surpassed. And staff monitor and notify candidates when the VEC is lifted. This system is different from the IEC system for publicly financed candidates. Unlike the main IEC, the VEC is applied to all candidates evenly, and instead of being raised incrementally per candidate, it's lifted for all candidates at the same time once. There are also no ongoing threshold statements. Instead, a notice is filed when the spending limit is hit.
Thank you, Michael. So now for our findings upon review of the public financing program and the individual expenditure ceilings. So given that the current campaign finance landscape is getting more interesting by the day. So looking back at 2024, we saw record high totals for both total candidate and total third-party spending, and this translated into 295 individual expenditure ceiling increases. But further analysis shows that the frequent IEC increases don't really do anything to meaningfully limit spending. Of the 295 increases, only 12 actually restricted spending. So kind of looking at the program with a primary goal, not so much to limit spending, but to enable viable campaigns when they are facing high levels of third-party spending or well-funding opponents. We want to ensure that candidates that may not have as many resources or as wide of a support base are able to have what they need to compete with independent expenditures. It is also important to note the administrative burden both on candidates and on city resources. So when talking about city resources, the audits team and our auditors are calculating these kind of moving totals on an ongoing basis. So there were a total of 263 threshold statements filed as part of the 2024 election, including a very high number of ongoing independent expenditure reports that are coming through. And so every day, the auditors are going through, reviewing the filings. They are calculating if IEC adjustments are warranted. If they are, they make the adjustments. They have to prepare communications that go out to both the affected candidates and the general public. Those are then sent out and posted on our website, and then we rinse and repeat. This burden also extends to campaigns and treasurers. So the threshold reports that currently exist are always due within 24 hours of meeting the applicable threshold. And this puts a particular burden on first-time or under-resourced candidates, just because every campaign has to dedicate a certain amount of their resources to ensuring compliance. They have to adjust their campaign strategies. And this, in our eyes, is an equity concern because candidates with fewer resources or perhaps smaller time treasurers or treasurers with less experience inevitably dedicate a disproportionate amount of their limited resources on these administrative costs rather than engaging with voters. All of this to say that this work is being done for what is arguably a hypothetical moving target. Additionally, we did review other jurisdictions that are kind of comparable from an activity perspective and looking at what they do. Our review found that there are not any comparable jurisdictions that employ kind of a similar model of public financing with these kind of ongoing incremental expenditure ceiling adjustments. All the other jurisdictions appear to use a type of model in which there is either no limit, but publicly financed candidates accept a lower contribution limit, or having an existing expenditure ceiling that is permanently lifted once financial activity in a given race reaches a certain level with a pretty strong regard for third-party spending.
Thank you, Ryan. With that, the main recommendation here is to adopt a more streamlined expenditure ceiling mechanism and reporting mechanism. The revised system would involve a one-and-done expenditure ceiling where the ceiling is lifted for the entire race when criteria are met, and it would be uniformly applied to all candidates instead of individual candidates. The proposed criteria for lifting the ceiling would be if a non-participating candidate makes expenditures or receives contribution in excess of 75% of the ceiling in their race, or if independent expenditures in the race exceed 75% of the current expenditure ceiling in the race. This would also allow for simplified reporting requirements. Candidates would give notice when making contributions or spending was going to exceed 75% of the ceiling. Staff would continue to monitor the independent expenditures for as long as the ceiling was in place, and this would also allow the supplemental threshold statements to be discontinued. We can look to a revised graphic of the one shown earlier. Candidates would still need to file their initial threshold statement because that is part of determining eligibility of other potential candidates for the public financing program. And then staff would monitor independent expenditures for the need to potentially lift the ceiling, and campaigns would give the notice to the Ethics Commission if their spending was sufficient to trigger lifting the ceiling. Once that ceiling was lifted for either of those reasons, the process would be done and ongoing notifications or lifting would not be required. To recap, the recommendations are to reformulate the current expenditure ceilings and apply new limits across the entire race rather than individualized to specific candidates, to set threshold and criteria that must be met for an expenditure ceiling to be permanently lifted for a given race, and discontinue the current policy of adjusting limits indefinitely. Also adjust the requirements to the additional reporting that is required under the current public financing program to reflect that this level of ongoing reporting would not be necessary under the revised model. And as previously stated, I just want to clarify again that these changes would not change who is eligible to receive public funds or the amount of funds they can receive.
Thank you, Michael. And now, before we discuss next steps, just two quick additional findings and recommendations. So, number one, making changes to San Francisco's outdated contribution limits. So, of course, the existence of contribution limits is very important because it helps to prevent over-reliance on wealthy donors and reduce the risk of or the appearance of corruption. And San Francisco's $500 contribution limit technically was last set in 2009 and has not been adjusted since. The $500 figure has been around since the original inception of the Campaign and Governmental Conduct Code, but the application has changed a little bit as we move to ranked choice voting and the way that that limit is applied. Additionally, as mentioned in Agenda Item 7, under Assembly Bill 1637 and the Ethics Commission's move to a .gov web domain, the disclaimer language included in the Campaign and Governmental Conduct Code will also become outdated once that change goes into effect, and we will need to go in and update that section of the Campaign and Governmental Conduct Code and the corresponding disclaimer language to reflect that change. So with those two recommendations that kind of come along with that would include an inflation-adjusted contribution limit, taking us from $500 up to $900. The full math took us to about $870, so we rounded up to the nearest 100. Of course, all of this to note that it is comparable if you took all the other localities in the state of California that under, kind of the abilities afforded to them by the Political Reform Act to set their own contribution limits, contrary to the state's default. We are slightly above average, and we would be on par with the city of Los Angeles. I believe they actually just did another CPI adjustment, and it's $1,000 for city council now, so we're still about on par, but otherwise well below the state's limit of $5,900. I will also note for this item that $500 to $900 is a bit of a big jump, but part of this recommendation does include kind of codifying within the law a mechanism for ongoing CPI-based adjustments for the contribution limits, so that all the jumps from now would be smaller and a little bit less jarring at face value. Additionally, with regard to updating the disclaimer requirements, basically just taking the language that is in Section 1.161 of the Campaign and Governmental Conduct Code, updating it to be a little bit more evergreen, and then updating the disclaimer language that we have available on our website for folks.
Yep. Again, next steps, similar to the previous item, would be discussion and feedback today from the Commission. I'd be very interested in any questions, comments, or concerns commissioners have about the preliminary recommendations. We are also working with the City Attorney's Office to draft legislation that would implement these preliminary recommendations, as well as talking to staffers of the Board of Supervisors to identify potential sponsors. And then draft language would ultimately need to come back before the Commission to be reviewed and voted on to refer this legislation to the board formally. Thank you. Happy to take questions.
Thank you. Thanks for acknowledging what a huge jump it was from 500 to 900. You mentioned that you foresee that jumps after this would be incremental and slower. And can you give me a timeline of like when you see that happening and how?
Yes. So the idea that Michael and I had kind of discussed is that we would just mirror what the state does based on 2-year legislative sessions. So the start of every odd year, we would just have a new adjustment for CPI that would go into effect.
And we would also recommend setting that up in a way that that can be made at the discretion of the executive director on that schedule, so it would not require future legislation every 2 years and would not require the commission to vote on a CPI adjustment as long as it's being made per the parameters set in the legislation.
Okay. That's helpful.
And maybe through the chair, to your question about pace,
Yeah.
do you agree that it's been 16 years since the $500 limit was set?
Yes.
CPI would warrant a $400 adjustment. Would that average out to every 4 years, roughly? There would be a $100 adjustment.
Probably, yeah. I think there probably
Probably
be
the pace.
yeah.
If CPI continues to increase at the same rate, that's probably what we would see.
Should we go to 1,000 since LA has done that? Is that right in terms of CPI for this year?
We could. I don't know if we necessarily need to mirror LA. The 900 amount was based on the pull from December, and then since then there's been a lot of inflation, and we kind of intentionally left it the 900 amount just to not kind of reflect the short-term potentially spikes we've seen earlier this year. It seemed like pegging to the December dollar value from last year might just be a little more stable, and also considering, as Ryan mentioned, the big jump of 500 to 900, there might be a reason to keep it at 900, but also, jumping all the way to 1,000 could also be totally defensible too.
I had a quick question. I know that you talked about the other jurisdictions. We have LA, Richmond. Or we talked about alternative programs, one with no expenditure ceiling and an offset of limits on the fundraising, and then the other one which we selected. Am I correct that we didn't choose the first one because we already offset the fundraising?
Not specifically for participating in the public financing program, but we do already have the contribution limits in place. So, that's kind of one reason that we're already doing a version of that. We don't have a even lower limit for publicly financed candidates. I think that could be challenging to administer if you're, a treasurer for a participating candidate and a non-participating candidate. They're going to have different limits, and I think it makes it a lot harder to just create awareness of what the current limit is if we have two limits going, some for publicly financed and some for non. And also the second option of changing the ceiling is a little more close to how the ceiling currently works. Basically, instead of saying we'll raise it indefinitely on and on and on, we'll just raise it once and then it's done. That's in line with how a lot of other jurisdictions do it. That's also how the voluntary expenditure ceiling works already. So there's kind of a model for doing that would be potentially less disruptive to the current process.
Based on how this has played out in prior elections, is your expectation that virtually every election the ceiling will eventually be removed?
Not necessarily. We did look at past cycles on that. I don't remember the overall percentage that we saw a change out, but looking at recent elections, there were definitely some races that under the ceiling, not a lot of spending was happening, not a lot of outside spending. They would stay under their ceiling, and that would be fine. And then for obviously more contentious high dollar races, the ceiling would get probably pretty quickly lifted if you have a non-participating candidate who's spending a lot of money or a lot of independent expenditures. That would get lifted pretty quickly. But I don't think it would be 100%. I mean, I don't know, Brian, if you have an estimate of what you think.
I know, I'm trying to remember. So from 2024, between the 6 supervisorial races and the one mayoral race, I believe two or three of the races would have still been beholden to their expenditure ceiling for the entirety of the race, just because there was not as much activity, there wasn't a whole lot of third-party spending, and then for the mayoral race, that expenditure ceiling would have been gone pretty quickly.
Thank you.
Any further questions? None from me. Yes.
How did you pick, I see where you picked, city employees, but how did they find out about the public meetings on the 13th and the 11th?
Yeah, those go out through our interested persons list, which is a list that can be signed up on through the website. So it goes out to that. That's what we generally encourage folks who are interested in the work of the commission to sign up for. That's also where the agendas go out through that. And anytime there's interested persons meetings, we also make it a point to invite specific people too that we think would have particular interest in. Well, for example, for the recent ones in March, we invited city officials from the trustee election boards, because they're obviously the people who kind of like help administer that program, so we invited them. I believe also we invited certain treasurers and campaign staff who regularly interact with our system and do filings. Since they interact with the public financing system, we wanted to make sure they were specifically aware of the IP meetings too, in case they missed the regular notice.
Thank you. I think we can take public comment now.
Chair Flores-Fang, we're checking the queue. We have one in the queue.
Can you hear me again?
Yes. Caller, your time starts now.
Great. David Pilpel. I'm sorry there isn't more public comment today. This is actually pretty important stuff, as you know. So again, please post the presentation PDF on the meeting website. Next, campaign finance laws and rules are tricky, in part due to legal restrictions, practical considerations, public benefits and burdens. I can understand and live with most of the staff recommendations, but I would add a date-specific program review for 4 years, a full implementation cycle after the effective date of these changes. I would prefer a $700, $750, or $800 contribution limit, not $900, with no periodic adjustment, so that would have to be considered again in the future. I think that a basic level of contributions and expenditures is needed to establish name recognition, especially for first-time and lesser-known candidates, to communicate policy positions and promote their election. But at some point, I think that more spending really has no marginal benefit and is just wasteful. I think that the reality is that campaigns will continue to have some of the basic functions that I just referred to, but that independent expenditures, or IEs, will continue to allow virtually unlimited spending by third parties, hopefully without coordination, bypassing contribution and spending limits. As long as economic interests and individuals seek domination, influence, power, retribution, or other benefits, real or perceived, from campaign spending, they will do so one way or another, and money will always find its way into our politics. Thanks.
Chair Flores-Fang, there are no more callers in the queue.
There's a motion here, since this was just informational, so I'm going to close item 8. I now call agenda item 9, discussion and possible action regarding preliminary matters in the matter of William Walker and SFEC case number 2223-507. I'd like to request that our Senior Administrative Analyst, Bertha Chung, introduce the item.
Good morning, Chair Flores-Fang, Commissioners. For the record, my name is Bertha Chang, Senior Investigator and Legal Analyst of the Enforcement Division. I'm here to provide the Commission with an update regarding the current status of this matter in the matter of William Walker, case number 2223-507. So at the Commission meeting on April 11th, the Enforcement Division presented 6 action items pertaining to preliminary procedural considerations. So this commission voted and adopted the recommendations set forth in the April 11th memo with respect to items 4, 5, and 6 with regards to the hearing on the merits, while 3 items remain outstanding regarding the procedures for hearing preliminary matters and who would preside over such preliminary matters. So at the conclusion of that meeting, that discussion, the Commission agreed to table the outstanding matters for the next meeting. However, over the past several weeks, enforcement staff engaged multiple discussions with respondent with an effort to reach a resolution. Although the parties were unable to resolve this matter through a stipulated agreement, the Enforcement Division confirmed that neither party has in fact got any preliminary matters to, any preliminary motions to present. And so as such, parties reach a mutual agreement now to request the executive director to schedule the hearing on the merits for July 11th, 2025, which is the next regularly scheduled commission meeting. So in response to the parties' requests, on June 3rd, 2025, Executive Director noticed the July 11th hearing as requested by the parties. So furthermore, the Enforcement Division submitted a hearing brief and supporting materials to the commissioners and respondent on June 11th, 2025, which were due 30 calendar days prior to the hearing as required by the enforcement regulations. And as you commissioners, you would have already received the hearing brief and the accompanying materials from us on June 11th as mentioned. A courtesy telephone call was also made to the respondent to confirm receipt of all these documentation in accordance with the accommodation requested by respondent. So in accordance with the requirements under the enforcement regulations, respondent may submit a responsive brief no later by June 26, 2025. And if one is submitted, then the Enforcement Division's rebuttal brief will be due no later than July 6, 2025, 5 calendar days prior to the hearing on the merits. However, because July 6 falls on a Sunday, so the rebuttal brief may be submitted no later than July 7, 2025. So in terms of action requested, at this point, no action by the Commission is necessary for this matter because this matter is fully prepared to proceed to the hearing on the merits scheduled on July 11th. But nevertheless, of course, the Commission retains this discretion to take any further steps it deems necessary to ensure the fairness and efficiency of the proceedings. So the Enforcement Hearing Guidebook and the checklist, in particular Stage 3 of the checklist, provide further details about the hearing process, including the procedures for presentation of the case by each party and the Commission's findings of facts and conclusions of the law. And with respect to presentation of the case for this hearing, I think it would be helpful for me to just draw out a few points from the checklist for the Commission's attention. So first thing on affirmation of oaths and affirmations, right? The Commission may administer oaths and affirmations to begin the proceedings, and after which each party will be allowed a specified amount of time to present their arguments, and parties may also enter exhibits into evidence, and they may also conduct witness examinations. So on oral arguments and rebuttals, so each party is allowed up to 15 minutes to present their arguments with 3 minutes for rebuttal. And this 15 minutes time limit applies to opening and closing arguments and not the process of presenting evidence through witnesses and exhibits. And the Commission may also extend any party's argument time. And as for the exhibits, parties may use exhibits to introduce evidence during the hearing, including emails, objects, photographs, or recordings. And unless stipulated by the parties, the Commission must determine whether each exhibit is admissible. As for witnesses, So witnesses shall be examined first via direct examination by the party that called that witness, and witnesses shall be then examined by the opposing party via cross-examination. And the party that called that witness will be given the opportunity to conduct a redirect examination of the witness. And after examination by all parties, the commissioners will have the opportunity to ask questions by the witness. And at the conclusion of the hearing, the commission must take its findings as well. So, of course, all these processes are well documented in the enforcement hearing guidebook and stage 3 of the checklist, which we have previously provided to you, commissioners. And this concludes my update regarding this agenda item, and I'm very happy to take any questions at this point. Thank you.
So, I mean, to be clear, it sounds like we're proceeding as we decided for the most part in the last hearing, except for the fact that there isn't an exchange of preliminary motions. We will be seeing, however, the briefs that'll be available to the commissioners, right?
Yes.
Before
so
the next meeting.
Yes, Chair Florence Fang. So to be clear, so on Wednesday, on June 11th, the Enforcement Division has emailed to all commissioners and emailed out the copies of the hearing brief, the list of exhibits, as well as the actual exhibits. But as a matter of easier reference, our Enforcement Division has also prepared physical copies of all these documents, which we will be providing to you at the end of this meeting. So all the materials are available for the commissions for the purpose of the July hearing.
Perfect. Thank you. And thanks for printing those out. We really appreciate your time and effort on that. And so then for the final order, that will be drafted by the staff and then presented to us for us to oversee, for us to finalize live at, I guess, the August hearing?
Sorry.
At the August meeting. If on July 11th we have the hearing, then the order is drafted, then we have to kind of walk through the order at the following meeting, right?
Yes, I think that's in accordance with what we have presented previously. That's the plan.
Great. Great. That's.
Thank you, commissioners. Thank you
very much. Anyone in the room who would like to provide public comment on this item?
Chair Flores Fang, we're checking for callers in the queue.
Thank you.
And there are no callers.
Okay, I don't believe that there is a motion required here either, so I'm going to close item 8. Or pardon me, item 9. I now call agenda item 10, show cause hearing in the matter of Matthew v. San Francisco Police Department, SFEC case number 25-998, file number 24021. This is based on a Sunshine Ordinance Task Force referral. So this item is being called in connection with a May 2nd, 2025 referral of the matter by the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force to the Ethics Commission for enforcement proceedings under Section 67.35D of the Administrative Code for the San Francisco Police Department's failure to comply with an order of determination, and with Section 10B of the Enforcement Regulations, which requires the Commission to schedule a show cause hearing upon receiving a referral from the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force, and to provide at least 15 calendar days' notice to the parties involved. Notices, I'm informed that notices were issued on May 27th, 2025 to the petitioner, Mr. Matthew Latoki, and to respondent SFPD. In this case, the notice was issued to SFPD Chief William Scott and Lieutenant Jonathan Ozol, who's also named in the referral. We have not appointed an individual hearing officer, so the Commission as a whole will serve as the hearing panel for this hearing. As chair, I'll assist in the administration of the rules and procedures of the hearing. And first, I need to ascertain if the parties are present for the hearing. So, Mr. Latoki, if you're here, could you please identify yourself and let me know if I'm pronouncing your name correctly? Lataki, thank you. Is there any representative from the police department here? If so, could you please identify yourself for the record?
Yes. Hello, good morning, Commissioners.
Jonathan Oswald. Okay. And I think moving forward, we would prefer if people came to the podium, but this is acceptable for identifying yourself. Thank you. As long as that's fine for the record. Is that correct, or do we need a more formal presentation at the podium?
Sorry, since you repeated the names, I think that'll be sufficient.
Okay, thank you. Okay, although the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force is not a party to this matter, the enforcement regulation, the regulations allow the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force to send a representative to present comments or arguments in favor of the referral. The Commission has learned that Sunshine Ordinance Task Force member Dean Schmidt will be in attendance today. If that's true, could you please identify yourself? Okay, I will note for the record that Dean Schmidt is not in attendance. Seeing as though they are not a party to the matter, I think all parties are present, so the hearing may proceed. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. I think that we planned to begin with the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force presentation, but seeing as they are not here, I see that the Enforcement Division has provided a memo in connection with this agenda item, and I think the next step here would be for Director Matthews to provide us some information regarding the memo and the referral.
Thank you, Chair Flores-Frank. Good morning, Commissioners. B.C. Matthews, Director of Enforcement, for the record. So as you rightly noted, the Enforcement Division, the Commission, is not a party to this matter, but we did provide a memo on this issue. Again, as you noted, this matter is here because of a referral that we received from the Sunshine Task Force. And our position here regarding this referral is that the Commission, the Charter and the Sunshine Ordinance does not provide authority for the Commission to assess any penalties or enforce against this type of referral. And the referral has been made requesting enforcement of this order. So essentially, the memo sort of explains that position, and I'm happy to answer any questions, any specific questions that you might have about that.
I don't have any specific questions, but I think it might be helpful for the record for you to maybe read into the record the portions of the code that you're saying limit our authority.
Absolutely. So under Section 10B of the current enforcement regulations as adopted by the Ethics Commission, the Commission is required to schedule this show cause hearing, as I know that. And part of the provisions of the enforcement regulations as adopted, the Commission may defer to SOTIF's findings of fact set forth in the order of determination, but you're required to review the conclusions of law de novo. I'm going to skip, since you already have information about how the proceeding will move forward.
I was thinking more reading about...
Regarding the legislative framework and enforcement authority of the Ethics Commission, yes, I'll get there. So, while Section 10B permits referrals, the Commission's enforcement powers are limited to, again, like I mentioned, the Charter and Administrative Code. Specifically, Section 6734 authorizes the Commission to act only on willful violations of the Sunshine Ordinance by elected officials or department heads. The current referral does not allege a willful violation by an official within the Commission's enforcement jurisdiction. Further, the alleged violation at issue involves a department's failure to comply with SOTIF's order of determination, not a willful violation by an elected official or department head. And per Section 15.102 of the Charter, the Commission you do have the ability to adopt rules or regulations related to carrying out the purpose of the ordinances regarding open meetings and public records, but you cannot expand your enforcement authority beyond what's defined under the law. And again, as mentioned, the the law provides you with authority regarding willful violations and not this particular type of referral that has come before us. Regarding the available remedies and limitations, Section 10B1, 5 of the current enforcement regulations permits you to issue cease and desist orders or recommend removal of officials where the commission determines on the basis of substantial evidence presented at a hearing that a violation has occurred. However, again, you're going to hear this a lot today, you may not impose administrative penalties for any alleged violations of the Sunshine Ordinance, whether they are willful or otherwise. And as I mentioned, our recommendation is that you take no action regarding this referral. For one, there is no evidence, again, that a willful violation by an elected official or department head occurred. Also, SOTIF provided no evidence that Chief Scott willfully violated the Sunshine Ordinance. And so, therefore, there's no violation over which you have jurisdiction here. And even if such a violation occurred, again, you're not empowered to impose any administrative penalties or compel respondent to comply with SOTIF's order of determination. There's no practical means of doing so. So for these reasons, we have, that's why we're saying probably better to do nothing.
Understood. Thank you. Do my fellow commissioners have any questions?
Yeah, thank you. I have a lot of questions, actually.
I bet.
It sounds like there's a lot of different issues that we're trying to address here, but is the only issue that we have to decide today whether there is cause to conduct a merits hearing, or are we conducting the merits hearing today? It's a little bit unclear to me.
Based on the current enforcement regulations, you should conduct the show cause hearing. However, SOTIF is asking for you to enforce their order, right? The referral that came to this commission is for you to enforce this order of determination by SOTIF that the police department failed to comply with this order. And we've reviewed that, and we're just sort of helping, guiding, and informing you what our position is regarding what SOTIF is requesting here and what you can and can't do.
But the question we have to decide first is whether we think there was a willful violation or not.
I'm sorry?
The question we need to decide first as part of this show cause hearing is whether we think there was a willful violation of the Sunshine Ordinance or not.
So the question that has come before us is not whether there is a willful violation of the Sunshine Ordinance. If that was a question, the referral would have come to staff, and we do investigate such questions, and it would go through a regular referral process. Here, this is really a non-willful violation referral, and I wish SOTIF was here to explain their referral better, but our understanding is this referral, and also to go through the show cause hearing process, it is really a non-willful violation referral, right? If it was a willful violation, it would have to go through a regular referral process. Anyway, so you don't have to, short answer to your question, you do not have to determine that. The question is whether or not the police department failed to, I guess you should have to consider that, but whether or not you can enforce this order, right, by the police department because of the police department's, by SOTIF, because of the police department's failure to comply.
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying, maybe this might be a question for the party, since I know enforcement is not a party to this proceeding, but it seems like we have to decide first whether there was a willful violation, and then if we think there was, we have to figure out if there's anything we can do about it.
I'll defer to
if we don't think there was, then we don't have to deal with that question.
Probably might be helpful.
Yeah. Through the chair, I think that the regulations, when they were adopted, and I don't want to get too into that because that's the next agenda item, but I think that it envisioned that the show cause hearing would be a forum for the commission to consider whether there had been any violation of the Sunshine Ordinance, not necessarily a willful one. So that this proceeding today would be you basically reviewing the record, hearing the parties, and determining whether the Sunshine Ordinance was violated even on a strict liability basis. The problem is you can do that. You can follow the regs and you can do that, but when you get to the end of that proceeding, even if the answer in your minds is yes, there's nothing you can do. you have no remedy available to you. You can't impose penalties. Normally, that would be the end point of a hearing. You decide that a respondent has violated campaign finance laws, you impose a penalty. Or you pass an order that they shall amend their filings or they shall disgorge some money they unlawfully received. And if they don't do that, you impose a penalty. You can't do that in this case. So I think what the Enforcement Division is saying is you could hold a proceeding to answer the question, was any violation committed, willful or otherwise? And you could answer the question one way or the other, yes or no, but even if the answer was yes, that would kind of be the end of it. It would be advisory, essentially. So I think what Director Matthews is suggesting is that that's not a worthwhile endeavor to do that, although you certainly could do it under the existing enforcement regs does provide that venue for it to happen, although as you know, we're recommending that you change the regulations to discontinue this process because of this very reality that under the charter you do not have the power to impose a remedy after such a proceeding.
And just
I'm sorry.
Just to add and maybe clarify that point, as for willful violations, you can find if there's evidence of willful violation, you can find that the official has committed official misconduct, and in that case, you will refer or make a recommendation to the appointing authority. But that's for willful violation. So in that sense, you could do something, right? But again, and we clarified with the Sunshine Task Force that this referral was not an allegation of a willful violation of the Sunshine Ordinance. That's right.
Sunshine Ordinance Task Force is not here to represent that on their own. Is that correct?
I don't see anyone from the Sunshine Task Force, but that's my understanding. And I made sure to clarify that question with them.
On the question of but we can find official misconduct. We can't do a penalty or order somebody to do something as a result of that. But I think that's
you could, but it would have to be against a department head or elected official.
Yeah, right. I do have questions about. I don't know what the order of operations here is, so I don't want to.
This is question time.
Yeah, on that point, I'm wondering if we're reading that provision too narrowly about department heads, because I don't think there's a department in the city where public records requests are handled by the department head. It's kind of implied that that's going to be delegated to somebody else, but there is ultimately responsibility up the chain, just as we would do under the Federal Administrative Procedure Act. Statutes say the secretary of the department will do X, but it's never the secretary themselves. It's somebody that delegated authority to. So I do have broader questions here about whether we're construing our authority here a little bit too narrowly and the reach of these provisions too narrowly.
Right, and I think we can get more into that at the next agenda item. I think it would be more appropriate for that. Unless it would help.
Yeah, so I'm thinking, I know
hearing.
I've kind of set things up for us to proceed with the hearing, but given these threshold questions, I wonder if it makes sense to at least discuss a portion of the next agenda item and swap them. I was actually going to propose that given all of the recommendations in item 11, that we maybe postpone that because they require longer discussion. But to the extent it's helpful to discuss even one subsection of that in order for us to have more clarity as we conduct the hearing, I think that could be it could be edifying for all and maybe even more productive. Right. But I wonder, I want to be respectful of everybody's time. People did appear today for the hearing, and so I wonder if I guess I do think it's an important discussion. I wonder, Commissioner Salahi, if there are more questions that you have that maybe could be answered without getting into the entire agenda, item 11 agenda, that could put us in a satisfactory position, or at least satisfy all of our curiosity as far as what the scope of our authority is and what we're actually doing here, so that in the end we don't have to come back and maybe waste anybody's time. So we're all clear on our authority and what the outcome should be. So I think maybe let's start there. Let's actually keep things as they are, and let's continue asking questions. And if we do delve into item 11, once we get there, you say, see above. I already said this. So it sounds like we concluded that we could, that for when there is a willful violation, that is within the purview, that is within the scope of our authority. And the outcome would be that we could find official misconduct.
That's right.
Now, as far as applying any penalty, as we usually have the authority to do, that isn't something that we could do or accompany with that finding of official misconduct. Instead, once we find that official misconduct, we would have to send it back. Is that?
We'll send a recommendation to the appointing authority of that elected official or department head.
Okay, and is that the end of the road for us? We
That's
kind of
right.
made our determination and then,
That's right.
okay. So this just seems like a type of remedy, like I agree with Commissioner Salahi, a type of remedy that we can employ that maybe isn't monetary as we usually would.
It is, and we acknowledge that.
Okay.
Regarding willful violations, yes.
Yeah, and so as far as what we're doing here today, the reason that isn't necessarily a remedy even today is because willful violation is not, like, it's not on the table.
Right.
That's your representation to us. And I find no reason to distrust your recommendation or your representation today. It would be very helpful if the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force were here to make that representation, but are there materials you can point to, that were on the agenda today that tell us this is, willful violation isn't on the table? Because I know, did they say it in writing? Because otherwise, I wonder if it's incumbent on us to.
Can we ask the complainant if they're alleging a willful violation? Does that?
That's true.
Because it seems like that's what we're supposed to decide, right? Yeah.
So, I'm sorry. I just want to clarify and make sure I understood your question. Again, usually there's a process that the Sunshine Task Force Ordinance follows when it refers allegations of willful violations to the Ethics Commission. And we have a process for investigating those and addressing those and resolving those. That's not the process that was followed. The process that was followed here instead was to come before you with the show cause hearing, right? So that's a clear indication.
Just procedurally.
Right, exactly,
Okay.
procedurally, right?
Understood.
So, yeah.
Understood. That's helpful. I wonder, should we continue with questions or should we ask the claimant?
Sorry for all the questions. No,
please.
I think we're ready to move on. Yeah,
We're ready to roll?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so we will now proceed with the show cause hearing. Thank you so much, Ms. Matthews. The hearing will proceed in the following manner. Each party will have 10 minutes to present their argument, with the option to reserve 3 minutes for rebuttal. First, we will hear from the petitioner, after which we will hear from the police department. Rebuttal arguments will proceed in the same manner if parties choose to reserve the 3 minutes of their time for rebuttal. Witnesses, if any witnesses are here, may testify for 3 minutes each. The commission may extend these timeframes at its discretion. And if the parties wish to call a witness, each witness may approach by stating their name for the record and being sworn in before testifying. We're going to request that witnesses come to the podium and any questioner sit right here in this section to the left. We can guide you once you're up here. For each witness, the party calling the witness will have the opportunity to examine the witness, followed by the opposing party's cross-examination. And finally, an opportunity for redirect examination by the party calling the witness. Commissioners will have an opportunity to ask questions of each witness at the end of their testimony. The petitioner will call and examine their witness first. After the petitioner concludes, the respondent will proceed with their presentation of evidence and witnesses following the same procedures. Parties may present new evidence or witnesses, but if new evidence is introduced, the commission may remand the matter to the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force for further review. During the hearing, per the enforcement regulations, the respondent bears the burden of proving that they did not violate the Sunshine Ordinance as documented by the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force Order of Determination and Referral. I'd like the commissioners to keep any questions to the end after each party concludes their presentation, and then at that time I'll call you all by name and you can each ask your questions. I retain the authority to set a time limit on any party questioning witnesses, and this is how the hearing will proceed. This hearing will be held in accordance with the Charter of the City and County of San Francisco, the Commission's enforcement regulations, and relevant provisions of the California Administrative Code. As such, the hearing will be subject to the following procedural rules. In addition to what I've discussed, the hearing is open to the public. The hearing is being recorded with copies of the recording available on request. The Commission will retain a copy of this recording until all opportunity for legal challenge has been exhausted. Formal and technical rules of evidence do not apply in this hearing. Instead, any relevant evidence will be admitted if it is the sort of evidence on which responsible persons are accustomed to rely upon in the conduct of serious affairs. Evidence is considered relevant if it has the tendency to prove or disprove any disputed fact that is of consequence to the case. Evidentiary exhibits do not need to be authenticated by a witness with direct knowledge of its content. Rather, evidence will be admitted if it is relevant and meets the standard that I just described. Parties may move to admit any exhibit. Once a party moves to admit an exhibit, an opposing party may object and present their argument for the objection, at which point the commissioners will determine the admissibility of the exhibit. The Commission has discretion to exclude evidence if its probative value is substantially outweighed by the probability that its admission will necessitate undue consumption of time. The Commission retains the authority to manage proceedings in a time-efficient manner, including by placing limitations on testimony if its probative value is substantially outweighed, like I said, by the undue consumption of time. So we will now proceed to the presentation of the case by petitioner, Mr. Matthew Lataki. Mr. Lataki, please proceed. I think earlier I said you had 10 minutes, but I believe it's 15 minutes. Can someone confirm that for me? I guess I decide. So you have 15 minutes.
You can get 15 minutes if you like.
Oh, sorry, one question. Would you like to reserve 3 minutes for rebuttal?
I would, please.
Okay. Please proceed.
Good morning to the Commission. I understand that the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force referred this to a commission as a Section 10B complaint. However, this is really a Section 10A matter, and the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force's referral contains the information to reach that conclusion. On October 2nd, the task force deliberated whether the records I requested were exempt from production and ultimately came to the conclusion that they were not exempt. They issued an order of determination ordering the police department to provide the requested records. On October 29, Chief Scott sent a letter to the task force acknowledging that he was aware of the order of determination, but that he, quote, will not release the ALPR map. This letter is attachment F in the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force's referral. That right there is what should have made this a Section 10A referral. Chief Scott is a department head. He was aware of the task force's order to release the records and deliberately chose not to follow it. That makes it willful. And contrary to what Director Matthews alludes to in her synopsis, complying with order of determinations are ministerial duties. If the legislative intent was that complying with these orders was somehow discretionary, then they wouldn't be called orders. It's also telling that Admin Code Section 6721F, which discusses the administrative remedy of the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force, specifically lists failing to comply with an order as something that the Superior Court has jurisdiction to order compliance of. Given those elements, the Commission does have jurisdiction to hear the matter. With that said, I'm aware of the limited remedies that the Commission has at its disposal. The Commission does not believe it has the authority to levy administrative penalties for Sunshine Ordinance matters, leaving the only option to issue an order of its own, one which Chief Scott will also likely ignore. But the fact that we cannot force compliance here does not make it meaningless to find that official misconduct was committed. Government transparency is best served from such an action. I ask that the Commission reconsider this matter as a willful violation by a department head and begin enforcement proceedings accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you. We now proceed to the presentation by the respondent. You have 15 minutes. Would you like to rebuttal?
Yes. Good afternoon, Commissioners, Chair Flores Fang. My name is Lieutenant Jonathan Ozel of the San Francisco Police Department. I'm here today to represent the police department in this matter. And I will start out by summarizing and reiterating the department's position on this matter and consistent response as to essentially why we have not and don't intend to release the map of ALPR or automated license plate reader cameras that are in the city. The San Francisco Police has asserted, as I've stated, all privileges available by law to maintain confidentiality as to the compiled ALPR map depicting the location of all installed ALPR cameras. While individual ALPR cameras will be visible from the street and not concealed, the compiled map of all locations is more sensitive than the individual locations that comprise it. The compiled ALPR map would allow individuals intent on committing crimes, particularly those participating in organized crime groups, to structure their movements to avoid the network of ALPR cameras. It would also expose the network to either targeted or widespread vandalism or disruption, or would expose flock engineers to harassment or attack during the installation and implementation phase of the project. This map, most importantly, is, as we are asserting, a record of security and intelligence information that is protected under California Government Code Section 7923.600 subsection A, and its contents is subject to withholding under Administrative Code 67.24 D4 and the official information privilege under Evidence Code 1040. Revealing the map would reveal secret investigative techniques or procedures, Admin Code Section 67.24 D4. It would endanger law enforcement personnel potentially, Administrative Code Section 67.24 D5, and in certain instances, endanger the successful completion of an investigation where the prospect of enforcement proceedings is concrete and definitive. Admin Code Section 67.24 D6. A record revealing the precise locations of all ALPR camera devices is also exempt from disclosure. We are asserting under Government Code Section 7929.210A because it would reveal vulnerabilities to an information technology system. The Chief of Police previously, along with our counsel, Stephen Betts, along with the City Attorney, have reiterated and continue to assert under the code sections that I've listed the reasons why, for public safety and for the benefit, we have not revealed the ALPR map. Thank you very much. I will take any questions that you may have.
Thank you. I think that now we actually go to the petitioner's presentation of evidence. Is that correct, or should we pause here for questions? We didn't ask Mr. Lataki questions, but I think that we now go into presentation of actual evidence and witnesses to the extent that each party has those.
I think you do unless you'd like to entertain the rebuttal now.
Okay. No, I think we can proceed with the witnesses.
That's fine. As long as we'll just come back to that then.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Lieutenant Ozul.
Okay. Thank you,
Thanks.
Commissioners.
Okay. So now we move to Mr. Lataki's presentation of evidence and witnesses to the extent you have anything else to share. I know you heard the procedure. You move to admit any pieces of evidence, and if there's any objections, we deal with those as they kind of come in.
Is the referral already considered part of the record from the task force?
To be frank, I wonder, I think this is a good threshold question. Are all the materials that were agendized part of the record? They are, even though they weren't introduced on the record?
I would just introduce them.
We consider all the materials in the agenda as part of the record.
Okay, yeah, happy to do that. So yes.
Okay. The agenda attachments were not actually posted online to David Pilpel's comments.
Okay.
But okay, so I will trust then that the order of determination is in the record, as is the letter, the October 29th letter from Chief Scott to the task force.
And if not, they'll be posted immediately afterward.
Okay. Then those are my two pieces of evidence.
Could you repeat the attachments, if you know them, the exhibit numbers from the referral that you're referring to?
The letter from the October 29th letter is attachment F, and the order of determination is, I believe, attachment G. Yes, attachment G.
Okay, seeing as you don't have any witnesses, but you did present evidence, actually, I think we'll now proceed to Lieutenant Ozol's any presentation of evidence or witnesses. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I would submit, based upon the attachments and the letters previously submitted from Chief Scott, as well as our attorney, Stephen Betts, and the documents contained in the original complaint. And then finally, just the statement, and certainly willing to entertain any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Like we did with Mr. Lataki, you didn't mention attachment numbers or letters. Could you do that?
Yes. If I may briefly, I'll just go into the complaint. So as part of the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force enforcement referral on May 2nd to Ms. Matthews, Director of Enforcement, it does have a chronology of the complaint that was originally filed on March 22nd, 2024 by Mr. Lataki. It goes through the chronology of our attending the hearings and providing our documents. And again, we originally asserted the same privileges to law enforcement under Government Code section and Admin Code sections that I previously stated. And the Sunshine Task Force did make a determination that we should comply and release the ALPR map. The last hearing on October of last year, we did provide a letter from the Chief of Police, Bill Scott, and going through the attachments here, just the reference where that letter occurs. I will refer to attachment D. This is from our staff attorney, Stephen Betts, and that was sent to Mr. Lataki on April 2nd, again reiterating our response and clarifying how we interpret Government Code Section 7923-600A, which was our primary reason to withhold investigative files. And thank you for your patience. Just getting to the exact attachment. I don't know if you'll also be referencing in the packet I'm not sure which attachment our Chief of Police letter does occur. However, I do have a copy of that letter, which was issued to the Sunshine Task Force on October 29th, 2024, from Chief Scott. And I do have a copy of that if you did need to see that.
Through the chair, that's Exhibit F, page 18, for your reference. Yep.
Okay.
F for Frank.
Correct. And then I would just, if I could mention, this was back in April from the chief who reached out and was aware that this hearing was going to take place, and just wanted to reiterate our position why he felt it very important to withhold this information for public safety. And in particular,
Sorry, is this presentation of evidence, is this cutting into witness testimony? I just want to make sure I'm gathering your time. I'm tracking your time correctly. Is this fine as presentation of evidence altogether?
I think if you can, Cecily, are you referring to materials in the record already, or you're introducing something new here?
just something new, just really briefly.
So if you want to just count this as part of the testimony then that's happening.
Okay. Can you please, is someone tracking his time besides me? Yeah, please add this to the time.
Okay, thank you. I'll just be very brief, and that was there is crowdsourced information websites out there called DFlock, which are aimed at making the locations of all the flock cameras across the country available to those who would wish to have that information that could potentially damage or vandalize them. So thank you for your time. That concludes my presentation, and I'm open to any questions you may have.
Okay, does that include your rebuttal later on, or? Because I think the
Yes.
next item is rebuttal for everyone. Okay.
That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, if that was your rebuttal, we can actually just question you now, if the commissioners have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for being here today. I just want to make sure I understand the timeline of what happened here. There was a Sunshine Ordinance Task Force order on October 2nd ordering the department to disclose these records in 2024?
There was an order. I don't recall the exact date, but in and about that time.
Okay. I'm looking, I don't know if you have them in front of you. I'm looking at attachment G, and it is a little bit confusing to me, but it says order of determination, date decision issued October 2nd, 2024, and it describes May 8th, 2024 Education Outreach and Training Committee decision recommending that the task force chair obtain an opinion from the deputy city attorney on this issue. And then on the second page, it says on October 2nd, 2024, the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force held a hearing to review the recommendation that it took an action ordering the police department to provide the requested records and to send the file to the Compliance and Amendments Committee for follow-up. What I can't tell is what the date is, because it does say in the document that it was on October 2nd, 2024, but at the bottom it says this order of determination was approved on December 4th, 2024.
Right. Are you referring to the Sunshine Task Force staff attorney determination?
That's what it looks like to me.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, that's correct. I've never received their determination, and I'm unaware of their position.
You personally are unaware of it?
I'm not, no.
And are you here representing the department and the police chief?
Yes.
And is it your testimony that the police chief was not aware of the order of determination?
Oh, no. The police department is aware of it, of the order of determination, and myself and our city attorney and our staff attorney. I was just referring to, there was a mention by the Sunshine Task Force that they were going to have their staff attorney make a recommendation and determination. However, I was never privy to that, and there's nothing in the materials that show their rationale as to why they felt this was a violation of the Sunshine Ordinance.
Thank you for clarifying.
Sorry for that clarification.
Thank you. No, that's helpful. So you were aware of the order to produce the records, but not the staff recommendation, the staff attorney recommendation memo?
Correct.
Okay. Are the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force orders about what productions are required final as to the department, or does the department have other avenues to appeal or challenge those decisions?
Since I've been in my position, we work with the chief of police and our city attorney to determine if we're going to assert a privilege under specific codes. Since I've been in the position within the past year, this has been really the only instance where we've pushed back and decided this information is privilege, and the Sunshine Task Force has disagreed. Normally, the Sunshine Task Force will hear, and I go to the hearings at least twice a month since I've assumed the position, and we provide documents and just make sure the public records requests are going on a timely basis. I haven't been in a situation until this particular one where we've asserted a privilege and the task force has said we disagree. I hope that it explains.
Yeah, I have some clarifying, and I don't want to take up all the questioning, but I do kind of want to clarify this. But because we don't have jurisdiction on the Ethics Commission to decide what the Sunshine Ordinance requires the department to disclose. That's a question that the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force resolves, as I understand it. If the task force decides that a record is covered by the ordinance and must be disclosed, does the department or any other agency have any avenue to appeal that to a court or to some other level of review, or is it presumptively required that they comply with the task force decision?
I'm not aware of where we go after the task force in terms of what the enforcement and compliance would be. I would have to reserve that question to kind of our attorneys. I'm not aware of the exact mechanisms that would happen if there is a disagreement and where it would go.
Okay. Yeah, executive director is looking at us.
Yeah, through the chair, I could provide some more context. The way that would work is essentially the department would assert privilege. They would not disclose the records, and then the person requesting the records could go to Superior Court and seek an injunction to get the records. So that's the way that like a higher authority than SOTIF would ultimately decide. So it wouldn't be the department going to seek an appeal of SOTIF. They would just do what the police department did and say, actually, SOTIF is wrong. SOTIF is misapplying state law. We actually are not required to disclose these records. They would do exactly what the police department did. The requester would then go to Superior Court.
So what is the effect of the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force orders? I mean, maybe this is a question for the city attorney's office, but
I would say that as an advisory body within city government, they serve as a forum for these disputes to hopefully be resolved, even though they don't have the power to issue penalties or issue injunctions themselves. My understanding is that it is a forum for people to have these discussions, for these laws to be interpreted and applied, and departments, I believe in many instances, they do follow the orders. But when the departments have a genuine substantive disagreement about what the law requires, as in this case, I think ultimately it would be the Superior Court that would resolve the dispute.
That's correct. And the Sunshine Ordinance itself provides for the definition that willful failure can be official misconduct, and then it provides for the enforcement mechanism that the executive director referenced about seeking review in a superior court. And that's all laid out in 67.34 and 67.35 of the Administrative Code.
And if anyone else has questions, I'm just collecting my thoughts for follow-ups. And so we decide we are asking if there's a willful violation of the Sunshine Ordinance or of orders of the task force? Or is that subsumed by, is the latter question subsumed by the first one?
I would just note for the commission that the notice of this hearing does not refer to a willful violation under 10A. It only refers to a 10B.
I do think, to your question, though, that it's a willful violation of the code, not of the order.
Okay.
Would be if you were considering such a case, which, as the deputy city attorney pointed out, this is not. But if you were, it would be a willful violation of the ordinance. You'd have to know that the elected official, department head, were aware that the law required them, in fact, to disclose the records, and they decided not to. That would be your what you would be deciding.
Okay, but. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, it sounds like, given what the city attorney's advice here is, we don't have purview with respect to how to analyze this with respect to whether there's going to be appeal or how to interpret the privilege here. So I don't know if this is our place to be deciding anything.
Right. So under 10B, which is in the notice, the regulations say if a city officer or employee fails to comply with an order of determination by the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force, then those agencies may refer the matter to the Ethics Commission. And we have an order from the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force. And the allegation is that the department failed to comply with it.
Yes, that's correct. Sorry.
Does the department dispute that it hasn't complied with the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force order of determination?
I would say we haven't willfully violated the order. We are contesting the order under state law and our privilege to withhold that information.
One follow-up question I have here is that, I understand that the process through which this got to us disqualifies it from the willful violation consideration. But what do we do when the petitioner reframes, the allegations as a willful violation? Is that improper? Do they have to because that's what I understand the mechanism through which it came to us, but then with the evidence presented to us, or the allegations, the reframing of the allegations, is that something that is appropriate to handle here, or is that like trying to revise your complaint live? Thank you.
Our recommendation would be that the matter go back to the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force, sorry. And then they would have to redo the referral appropriately. That would be our recommendation.
Okay. So the staff is revising their recommendation based on the evidence?
Your question is if you wanted to consider this as a willful violation, we would recommend that this goes back to the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force, and they would have to redo the referral.
Got it.
If I may, I would just urge the commission to not find it as a willful violation for all of the reasons I mentioned, that we're asserting privileges afforded to the police department by law. And as the chief stated in his letter, very open to transparency and knows that this is a topic of general concern, certainly surveillance technology and being open to the public, and that information is on our website, and This policy, ALPR policy, has been vetted and complies, I believe, Administrative Code 19B, I believe, of surveillance technology, and it's been posted and being reviewed, I believe, by the Commission on Information Technology, COIT. That's all public information, so I would urge the Commission to not find a willful violation if indeed the Sunshine Task Force decides that it will change its stance to consider it a willful violation and re-refer the matter. Thank you.
Not sure if commissioners have any more questions for Lieutenant Ozul. If not, then we call Mr. Lataki for his.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
The police department has read verbatim the same points as they have at the SOTF hearing. They are allowed to disagree with the SOTF's conclusion, but that does not give them the authority to ignore the order of determination. Further, I do not characterize the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force as an advisory body. Under the plain text of the statute, complying with their orders are, in fact, a ministerial duty. Thank you.
Please stay at the podium. Thank you.
Do you have a citation to a provision of the Sunshine Ordinance that requires compliance with orders of the task force?
So section 60, admin code 6721 F. If a custodian of a public record refuses to comply with the request of any person or inspection of copy or public record, or with an administrative order under this section, the Superior Court shall have jurisdiction to order compliance.
And what exceptions are there for privileges or other types of assertions that the SFPD has here?
Can you repeat the question?
What exceptions are there as to privilege, assertions of privilege, or other types of defenses that the SFPD's office has here?
Well, so in the task force hearing, they, the police department raised their objections, saying that they believe these exemptions applied. The Sunshine Ordinance Task Force heard their arguments, heard my arguments, and came to the conclusion that they did not apply. I will say that the exemptions are not mandatory. There are certain exemptions to the Public Records Act and the Sunshine Ordinance where an agency would be barred outright from releasing it. This is not one of them. There's nothing illegal about them releasing these records. Even they believe it's exempt, but it's not. It's not like a privacy, like, you know, people have the constitutional right to privacy, and so you can do reverse CRP actions, blah, blah, blah.
But who has the final determination with respect to that?
I mean, I would say the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force does. And when they don't, they go to the Superior Court. And my reading of this is that you could seek a writ in Superior Court to enforce the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force's order without having to go on the merits again. Otherwise, the entire scheme of the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force is meaningless.
And why haven't you gone to the Superior Court?
I am.
Okay.
I have no questions for Mr. Lataki.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so this concludes the parties' presentation of this case. And commissioners have had the opportunity to ask any questions. And unless there are any further questions, I think this concludes the hearing.
Is there a discussion period for us? Yeah.
Yes, I think that after, after I conclude the hearing, we can then open up for discussion and motion. Is that right?
Yeah, I think I would say this concludes the presentation of the case. the hearing is still continuing. So we'll, you can either entertain motions now, or you can open it to public comment and then return to motions.
Great. So this concludes the parties' presentation of the case in the show cause hearing in the matter of Matthew Lataki v. San Francisco Police Department. And so I'm not sure if the commissioners are ready to entertain a motion, but I'm happy to open up the floor for discussion so that we can decide on how we'd like to proceed given all the evidence before us. I think that the scope of our authority is somewhat clearer now. And I mean, I can start by saying that based on the evidence before us, it seems as if I mean, my recommendation at the moment would probably be to send this back to the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force for further determinations there. I think it's up to the parties to proceed as they wish. I mean, it sounds like there are plans, there are things in order for how to proceed, but I think as far as the limits of our work here today and what I think would be efficient for us to do, it might be to send it back to the advisory body or the body that has the authority and, you know, the interpretive context to really decide whether this falls under the exemptions, et cetera. So I'll start off with my recommendation, but open to hearing everyone's thoughts.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I want to thank the commission staff and the parties and the public for their patience as we wade through this and try to better understand the procedures here. This hasn't come before us previously. It seems like, and this seems like a good reason for why we should revisit the way these regulations are drafted moving forward so we have better clarity. But it seems like under Section 10B, we do have the ability to consider whether a city employee has failed to comply with an order of determination by the task force. My view is that regardless of the merits of the underlying dispute about whether the records are actually required to be disclosed under the law, the task force has issued an order and there has been a failure to comply with it. And that's a separate issue with whether the order is valid or invalid. But under Section 10B, subparagraph 5 about available remedies, the language there about willful misconduct refers to failure to discharge any duties imposed by the Sunshine Ordinance and a few other laws, Brown Act, California Public Records Act, et cetera. And for us to find a violation of the Sunshine Ordinance, I think we also need to treat a violation of the task force orders as a violation of the ordinance, and I don't know whether that actually is the case. We just don't have enough information about that ordinance. So I don't feel prepared to take an action on this without either further submissions from the parties or the city attorney's office to clarify that. But it does trouble me that there's just an order out there that is not being complied with by the department. I think relevant to that, more areas that I don't know about and we might need to understand is when you go to the Superior Court on one of those Sunshine Ordinance task force orders, are you relitigating the privilege and disclosure requirements, or are you just litigating whether the order's been followed?
Is that for the city attorney or Mr. Lataki?
I think that's more for the city attorney, yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think that you have that information in the materials before you today, so that may be something that you want to either send back to the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force for further clarification, or it's something that we can provide further guidance on in advance of decision about the enforcement regulations and how you're going to be moving forward on this type of material.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that would be very helpful. So I mean, I know we're moving to agenda item 11 next, and I'm happy to discuss anything that the commissioners are interested in discussing, but I do think that it would be very helpful to have that memo before at least the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force portion in earnest.
And to have a representative from them here.
Correct.
Yeah.
I agree.
And I just wanted to add, part of this is about like what does willful mean in this context, and I really understand the Enforcement Division's hesitation to try to find a willful violation of the ordinance where that's turning on some dispute of law. What's not clear to me is whether a willful violation of the task force order in and of itself is enough for us to proceed with an enforcement action here. Because if it is, I think there is a willful violation of the order. They have the order, they've acknowledged it, and they're not following it because they disagree with it. That's not calling for a response. Yeah, no, I understand.
I think that we just have to decide on a motion and move on that today if there aren't any more questions. Commissioner Francois or Sai. Yep. No questions. Okay. Okay. So, and I guess I'm not I'm not sure that I know the conclusion of your recommendation. So that but my motion would be to for now, send this back to the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force, but also request that our team, the city attorney provide a memo to inform us or to better educate us on how to revise the regulation, which is a next agenda item, but still related. So that's my motion.
And I'm not sure. I don't know which way we should go. But if we have the ability to table taking action on this, and get further analysis about whether a violation of a task force order itself is enough to confer some sort of authority on us to review it, then I think that would be helpful.
Yes, I believe you have the authority to table it. I would just ask the Enforcement Division if there's any timeline on their side that you want to be aware of.
There's no timeline. I just would like to note for the record, and maybe Lieutenant, oh my goodness, I'm sorry. Oh, maybe he can confirm this, but our understanding is that Chief William Scott is no longer part of the police department. So that might be something that you would also have to factor in if you need to consider whether or not this was a willful violation.
And we could also procedurally transform this, because earlier Ms. Matthews explained that this came to us as a regular, it came to us separate and apart and different than a willful violation allegation would come to us. And so I don't know if procedurally it makes a difference. I think that for matters of efficiency, I think that it's morphed, and I think there's no need to revisit and have it come to us another way if it's already here. But if that's incorrect, please. You should probably just sit on the first row, I think.
I think that matters that come before you come based on our findings, investigative findings and our recommendations, right? So not all complaints that come before the Ethics Commission actually come before you, right? So it would have to go through that process first. Make our own findings. We haven't done that. We haven't investigated this matter to determine, as we would, right? We haven't spoken to any parties, any witnesses to really make the finding, and right. So that's our reservation, that you should probably, if you wanted to consider this as a willful violation, we strongly recommend that it goes back to task force and they redo the referral.
We've belabored the point, but under 10B, the remedies section does refer to remedies for willful misconduct. So even the line between 10A and 10B is not entirely clear to me. Yeah.
I guess if we were to, I think my main concern is going off of an interpretation that we're then trying to amend, and then revisiting this. There are a lot of moving parts, but I think the safest, my motion is to send this back to the Sunshine Task Force, and then be continued.
We're getting a message from the control room to speak in your guys' mic.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Yes. No one ever tells me I speak quietly until I get here. What a gift. So my motion is to send this back to the Sunshine Task Force for, given that our deliberations were public, I think our position is somewhat consistent, and so to the extent it needs to be revisited, I think that the avenues are clear as to how this comes before us again. I think that we can still entertain discussion on this, at least not necessarily this matter, but at least this point as part of Agenda Item 11 once we're briefed by the city attorney. And so I think we can make a vote on that, and then if Commissioner Salahi wishes to table it, that you don't vote with this motion, I guess.
Yeah. And that's, just to clarify, that's without prejudice to the issue returning to us.
Correct. Yeah. Yes, that's without prejudice to the issue returning to us. To the extent we can decide. I mean, we're not adjudicating anything such that I would have to decide it's with or without prejudice, but.
That's correct. You could just send it back.
Yeah.
And that would then allow them to present it as a willful violation if that is what the evidence before them showed. Right. And then that would provide notice to the parties that that's where you're going, which was not part of the notice today. And you'll just want to be sure to take public comment before you vote on that.
Of course. Yeah. So that's my motion, but we're open to public comment.
Chair Flores-Fang, there's one in the queue.
Great. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Caller, your 3 minutes starts now.
Great. It's David Pilpel. This may take me a little more than 3 minutes, so if you'll allow it. I am a longtime member of the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force. I was not planning to present on behalf of the task force. Dean Schmidt was supposed to do that. I don't know why he's not here, but I can provide some additional background. So if you'll give me about a little more than 3 minutes, I can run through my comments here.
That seems acceptable to me.
Okay, and hopefully that helps.
You'll just want to provide equal time to anyone else commenting on this particular item.
But doesn't this, well, I guess because they didn't appear.
Yeah, but I don't anticipate you're going to have other people.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, we can proceed. Just please let me know how long they go so I can keep equal time.
That's fine. I appreciate that. So I mentioned the attachments earlier today. I see that they're now available, but they're not easy to find. They're attached to the staff report in HTML. They're not linked on the agenda itself. The Sunshine Ordinance Task Force found that the underlying documents are public and should be disclosed. The Task Force Order of Determination on pages 21 and 22 of the documents state the violation that we found. The task force did not find a willful violation, I think, largely because there is a good faith dispute between the task force and the police department as to the underlying public records. The petitioner, Matthew Lataki, and the task force believe that the list or map of the camera locations is subject to disclosure and that no exemptions from disclosure are applicable. The police department believes that disclosure would reveal law enforcement investigative techniques or procedures, and they explain that on pages 18 and 19 of the documents. I think the goal here is to avoid or create a clear record for litigation and perhaps to resolve the issue. Your staff states that the issue is compliance with an order of the task force, but it's really about compliance with the law, with the Sunshine Ordinance. The order is just the expression of the task force's determination. For comparison, other city departments have hardware, systems, and technology in support of law enforcement and other public safety and public service purposes. I do not believe that lists of locations or maps of such installations would be generally exempt from public disclosure, although specific exemptions may apply. I think that would include MPA, PUC, the Department of Technology, DEM, and other city departments, whether subject to Administrative Code Chapter 19B as to surveillance technology or not. And I'm not referring to any data or video, including actual license plate data. The Ethics Commission can determine here if there was a violation of the Sunshine Ordinance. If the Commission has no greater remedy than the task force today, then I think the administrative process with the city is exhausted. The petitioner can proceed to court if he wishes to do so, and we can discuss other alternatives to that more in item 11. The task force heard this matter several times and considered the asserted exemptions by the police department. So I don't think there's anything further for the task force, and I would oppose a re-referral back. Again, my fellow task force member, Dean Schmidt, was supposed to be here today, and I can answer any questions or provide greater clarity if that's useful to the commission at this time. Thanks very much.
Callers in the queue.
We're checking to see if there's any more callers in the queue. And there are no more callers.
I'd also make a motion for the record. My motion would be to table this issue and not take action until the next meeting, pending further clarity about whether the city attorney has a view on, and maybe the task force or the complaint the parties do, on whether a violation of an order issued by the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force is sufficient under our regulations to support a finding of wrongdoing or misconduct.
Yeah, I'd have to revise my motion in light of, I think this public comment was helpful for understanding how productive it would be to send this back to the Sunshine Task Force. So I would second Commissioner Salahi's motion.
You're withdrawing your motion then?
I'm withdrawing my motion. That's correct. I think that now the clerk would have to call the roll, or unless Ms. Matthews has a comment, which it appears she does.
I just wanted to clarify, Commissioner Salahi, especially based on the information that we just heard from Mr. Pibble, I think that you can consider whether or not this was a non-willful violation or a willful violation. It sounds, I'm just wanting to be sure what the request is of the city attorney and the clarification that you need so that we can also be prepared for that.
Thank you. What I'm thinking of anyway is there a way, is a violation of an order issued by the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force itself something that we can make a finding about? And if so, what findings are we allowed to make? Okay. And what remedies are there? I know the regulations have something there, but it's the way that they're written, it's a little bit confusing about whether we would have to decide that the non-disclosure, whether we'd have to relitigate the propriety of the exemptions that have been asserted, or whether it's enough for us to defer to the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force and treat their order as binding in some way.
Yes, we can provide more guidance on all of that. And I know that there has been some mention about the proposals to revise the regulations. You'll just want to remember that whatever you do on that item, we'll be applying the current regulations with respect to this particular matter.
I didn't hear the last part that you said. Can you say that again?
Just wanted to make sure, because I know there's been some blending of this item with the next item on the proposed amendments. So the guidance we'll be providing will be what your ability is under the current regulations as to this particular referral, right? Because of the timing of that.
Okay.
But yes, we can provide clarity on all of that in advance of the next meeting if the commission decides to table this matter.
It'd be very helpful to understand what actions we can take. And then with respect to the Superior Court, if that moots our process here, then I think it's not going to be useful for our time to consider any of this either. So it'd be helpful to understand that as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. I think, do I hear a motion to table this matter and for the city, the Deputy City Attorney to provide a memo briefing us in time for the next commission meeting and for us to discuss this more fully then. And by this, I don't mean this matter specifically, but just the specific questions that Commissioner Salahi asked. Anyone want to second that motion?
I'll second it.
Clerk, would you please call the roll?
On the motion to table the item and get more information on item 10, Chair Flores-Fang?
Aye.
Commissioner Salahi?
Aye.
Commissioner Tsai?
Aye.
Commissioner Francois? Aye. Chair Flores-Fang with 4 in the affirmative. It passes unanimously.
you. Item 10 is now closed. Thank you for the attendees. For your attendance here today, you're free to go if you'd like. I now call agenda item. Sorry. Okay. Understood. Do you want to say that publicly, or do you have to excuse yourself? Is there
I need to excuse myself for the duration of the meeting. I have a very important school district meeting at 555 Franklin. I need to leave now.
Okay, thank you. Safe travels. I was calling we won't have a quorum, so, sorry, Commissioner. It's a busy day. It's exciting.
I was going to say, I'm okay with tabling this matter until the next meeting. I think it'll be helpful for everyone, especially in light of the conversation that we just had.
Yes, I was going to propose that. So I call agenda item 11, but I'd also, and this is the presentation and discussion regarding proposed amendments to enforcement regulations. Director of Enforcement B.C. Matthews was going to introduce the item, but I think that given the discussion we just had about item 10 and how we'd like to proceed there, it makes sense to table this matter to our next commission meeting. So do I hear a motion to table this matter and discuss it at our next meeting?
I have a quick question. Ms. Matthews, will you be presenting a presentation with us?
Yes.
Oh, perfect.
Yes,
okay, great.
we'll do.
Yeah. So
Makes sense for you to upload it beforehand?
Yeah.
Yes, we'll make
Great.
sure.
Thank you.
Great.
No technical glitches this time
great.
around.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll move to table.
Second.
Great. Clerk, can you please call the roll?
I
I guess do we
public
need
comment?
Commissioner Francois on this? Yikes.
I think Commissioner Francois has already stepped out of the meeting at this point.
Okay.
I believe per your bylaws, you are going to want to ask public comment on the motion to
Of course,
table.
of course, yeah. Public comment, anyone?
Chair Flores Feng, we have one in the queue.
Sure.
Once again, David Pilpel. So I mentioned earlier my appreciation to staff for the recent interested persons meetings on this topic. I have not reviewed the proposed language in great detail yet and can follow up with the staff if I see something. The task force, the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force has requested that your staff present this proposal, particularly as it relates to the Sunshine referrals, at a Sunshine Ordinance Task Force meeting, which perhaps we'll now have more time to do, given the motion, with practical implications as to how the new process would work, especially what a task force referral should include. And again, I can follow up with staff, especially in light of the handling of the previous item, and thanks again for listening.
Okay, I think public comment is now closed. And so you can call the roll on the motion.
Chair Flores Feng, on the motion to table item 11. Chair Flores Feng,
Aye.
Commissioner Salahi,
Aye.
Commissioner Sai.
Aye.
And Chair Flores Feng with 3 in the affirmative, it passes.
Great. I now, so let's see, so we close agenda item 11. I now call agenda item 12, which is discussion and possible action on items for future meetings. We've discussed several action items for future meetings, but does anybody else have anything else to add?
No.
Public comment on that?
Checking in the queue to see if there's anybody for public comment.
Thank you.
And we do have one.
Great.
I hope the last time, David Pilpel. So just a suggestion, in the future, if you could schedule action items and hearings early on the agenda and put the policy matters later, I think that might be helpful for parties to matters. Everything gets attended to, but just in terms of order of priorities. That's all for now, and once again, thank you very much for listening to me today. Appreciate it.
Checking to see if there's anybody else in the queue, and there's none.
Okay. Agenda item 12 is closed. I now call agenda item 13, additional opportunity for general public comment. Is there anyone in the public who'd like to
Checking the
comment?
queue.
Thanks.
And there is none.
Okay, agenda item 13 is closed. I now call agenda item 14, adjournment. Thank you all for hanging in there. This concludes the June 13th, 2025 meeting of the San Francisco Ethics Commission.
I haven't been that long in a while.